T-minus 10, 9, 8,
The clock is operating. We're underway.
Tranquility Base here. Endeavor, go at throttle left.
Houston's Intercontinental Airport was pure bedlam. Arriving as we did wasn't a problem. But of course, no one wants to arrive here. Everyone wants out, and that's all but impossible. Ticketing and security checkpoints were overwhelmed with people taking any flights they could to get any place. They just want out and away from the storm. Abraham Reyna and his family, 7 of them traveling together, are trying to get to Seattle. Their route, hardly direct. Texas up to Alaska, and then down to Washington State.
Domestic flights right now are virtually impossible to get. If you don't have a ticket already in hand, you're not going to be getting out.
Ferris Gevguli and his wife were trying to get to Ohio.
It's like a madhouse out there. I mean, people are over the street.
If they don't get out now, they probably won't. We're going the other way. Our ride from the airport into Houston went smoothly until we hit the highway ramp. Okay, we're hitting first major traffic, which is 45 south to downtown. It's backed up. Drivers pulled over to ask police what they should do.
I stayed 4 hours and went 1 mile.
We headed for the first exit to turn around and try to get on the highway from the feeder road. Mike Miller, my cameraman, is from the Houston area, and fortunately we've got him with us, so maybe we'll be able to find our way back to where we've got to meet up with our satellite truck. On 45 northbound, everyone was simply sitting. We finally made it to the southbound lanes, where there were barely any cars. Just a parking lot on the other side. All the people trying to go north to get out of Houston, and they just simply aren't moving. The traffic is simply not moving. At least for the people stuck running from Rita, there is still time, but the clock is ticking, and it is clear. Houston, we have a problem. John Zarella, CNN, Houston, Texas.
Und in wenigen Stunden wird Hurricane Rita mittlerweile leicht herabgestuft auf die Stufe 3 an Land gehen. Und erst dann werden wir erfahren, was Rita tatsächlich anrichten kann. Und wir haben auch unseren Wetterchef Alexander Hildebrand gefragt, wie viel Regen Rita mit sich bringen wird.
Insgesamt werden lokal bei der Passage von Rita so 500 bis 600 Liter Regen pro Quadratmeter runterkommen. Und zwar sehen wir hier schon jetzt das aktuelle Regenradar. Hier drüben ist Galveston. Das Ganze schiebt sich jetzt hier so rein in Richtung Westen. Es dreht sich gleichzeitig im Uhrzeigersinn nach unten. Und das sind diese Regenmengen, die lokal 300, 400, 500 Liter Regen pro Quadratmeter bringen werden. 600 Liter Regen pro Quadratmeter, das bekommt Berlin, aber in einem ganzen Jahr. Und Rita wird diese Regenmengen lokal im östlichen Texas und auch im westlichen Louisiana hier mit diesen enormen Regenbändern dann innerhalb von wenigen Tagen bringen.
Ja, und meine Kollegin Alexandra Karla hatte mit Bettina Lüscher, Sprecherin des Welternährungsprogramms und langjährige CNN-Journalistin, über die Situation in New Orleans und die Gefühlslage der betroffenen Amerikaner gesprochen, die zum zweiten Mal innerhalb von 4 Wochen von einem Hurrikan heimgesucht werden.
Wenn Sie jetzt zum zweiten Mal diese chaotischen Zustände vor einem Hurrikan da beobachten, was fällt Ihnen dazu ein? Warum gelingt es nicht, das besser zu organisieren?
Ja, es ist natürlich eine schwierige Situation. Krisen, wenn sich solche Katastrophen entwickeln, muss natürlich sehr schnell sehr, sehr viel organisiert werden. Die Amerikaner haben jetzt natürlich da die Vorwarnung. Es ist natürlich eine sehr große Belastung für die Menschen. Stellen Sie sich vor, viele, die auch in dieser Region, die jetzt ja wieder betroffen sind ja erst vor ein paar Wochen aus der anderen Region geflohen. Also ich glaube, dass da die psychischen Sorgen der Menschen ja unglaublich groß sein muss, die eventuell in New Orleans schon alles verloren haben, jetzt eben umgekehrt sind, nach Texas geflohen sind, auf was sie ja dachten, wäre ein sicheres Gebiet und jetzt wieder fliehen müssen. Und es scheint aber auch so zu sein, also dass die amerikanische Regierung ist ja sehr aktiv und macht eine Menge. Die haben ja auch sehr, sehr viel Erfahrung. Das Welternährungsprogramm arbeitet ja eng immer mit den Amerikanern zusammen, mit den Militärs auch, mit den Helikoptern. Wenn irgendwo Krisen auf der Welt sind, sind die Amerikaner auch immer mit die Ersten, die helfen. Und von daher sind die auch, glaube ich, ich, ganz gut gewappnet dafür.
Sie haben Freunde in New Orleans. Wissen Sie denn von denen irgendwas Neues? Die müssen ja jetzt quasi wieder raus aus der Stadt, weil die Ausläufer zumindest von Rita New Orleans wieder bedrohen.
Ja, die zum Teil eben dann auch, das waren zum Beispiel Restaurantbesitzer in New Orleans, wo die Familie dann geflohen ist vor dem ersten. Der Vater hat es aber wirklich den Sturm noch mitgemacht, konnte dann aber 1, 2 Tage später dort auch weggehen und wo jetzt gerade wieder der Aufbau so beginnen sollte. Und das ist natürlich schon ein schwerer Schlag für die Leute.
Frau Lüscher, Sie haben lange in den Staaten gelebt, zwar nicht direkt im Hurricane-Gebiet, aber in Atlanta. Das ist ja da in der Nähe, sage ich mal. Und Sie haben auch in Ihrem Urlaub solche Hurricane-Vorbereitungen miterlebt und Hurricanes miterlebt. Wie fühlt man sich da? Ist man da panisch oder ist man daran gewöhnt?
Also gewöhnt tut man sich mit Sicherheit nicht. Ich glaube, dass die Menschen sich aber auch jetzt einfach umgestellt haben. Also als ich letztes Jahr im September, gleiche Jahreszeit, eben im Urlaub war, wurde erst am ersten Urlaubsort das Ferienhaus dort zerstört. Da konnte man dort nicht hinfahren. Und dann, als man umbuchte, bei dem nächsten Ferienhaus kam dann der nächste Hurricane dorthin. Und was einem immer wieder auffällt, wenn man so als deutscher Tourist dann dort ist, dass zum Teil die Leute doch etwas nonchalant damit umgehen. Dass sie eben denken, naja, wir sitzen das jetzt aus, wir barrikadieren uns. Und das hat sich seit Katrina, glaube ich, völlig geändert. Die Warnungen der Behörden werden jetzt wirklich wahrgenommen. Natürlich war es bei Katrina auch so, dass da das Problem war, dass viele Menschen einfach nicht fliehen konnten. Aber es gibt immer auch eine kleine Gruppe von Leuten, die unbedingt dann da bleiben wollen. Da gibt es jetzt ja auch schon Storys wieder darüber. Aber ich glaube, dass sich da wirklich was geändert hat.
Sie sind Sprecherin des Welternährungsprogramms. Sie haben dort auch im Golf von Galveston, haben Sie erzählt, 2 große Schiffe liegen, die eigentlich wohin sollten?
Ja, also Amerika ist ja ist ja der größte Spender für das UN-Welternährungsprogramm. Das heißt, die geben uns Geld, die geben uns aber auch Nahrungsmittel. Und wir haben also 6 Schiffe insgesamt, die jetzt in Galveston entweder gerade da waren oder dorthin sollten, um eben von Amerika gespendete Nahrungsmittel wie zum Beispiel Linsen, Mais, Speiseöl und Ähnliches nach Afrika und nach Nordkorea zu bringen. Und diese Schiffe werden zum Teil jetzt eben wieder aus dem Hafen rausgezogen, sind auch schon auf einem offenen Meer, um eben diesen Sturm dann auf offener See auszustehen und dann wieder dahin zu gehen und weiterzuladen, wenn das eben noch möglich ist.
Sehr vertrauenserweckend, so ein Sturm auf offener See.
Aber es ist ein bisschen auch erste Welt, zweite Welt, dritte Welt, nicht? Also Amerika hilft immer und das, was unsere tägliche Arbeit ist, die Katastrophengebiete in den armen Ländern, sehen Amerikaner jetzt auch mal, wie schnell sowas passieren kann.
Sagt Bettina Lüscher. Sie ist Sprecherin des Welternährungsprogramms und langjährige Korrespondentin von CNN in Atlanta. Vielen Dank.
To make landfall early on Saturday morning near the border between Texas and Louisiana. Right, Femi Oke is at the CNN International Weather Center and she joins us from there. Femi.
Hello there to you, Becky. Let me just explain the whole downgrading process. It means that every couple of hours an aircraft is sent in towards the storm, flies across the eye of the storm. This is the eye of Hurricane Rita here, and measures the barometric pressure, looks at the wind speeds as well, gives us all the data back and gives an idea that some of the wind speeds may have dropped a little bit. But the difference between a Category 3 and a Category 4, in the last few hours we had a Category 4. That means the maximum winds going up to 213 kilometres an hour. Now it's down to Category 3. We're looking at 201 kilometres an hour. It's not that big a difference. Either way, you don't want to be caught outside with that kind of ferocity and those kinds of winds and rain as well. This is the most dangerous part of our hurricane. So right along this coastline from that far eastern side of Texas across to the southwestern section of Louisiana, that's going to be the most dangerous place to be, particularly as this hurricane moves ever closer in towards land. So anything in terms of flooding and rain that we're seeing right now is going to be magnified tremendously. Expecting a hurricane to make landfall the very early hours of Saturday morning local time. But all along this coastline here, we've got cooler water, and it could speed up as it heads into cooler water. So where you're seeing the hurricane watch signs, hurricane warning signs, it means the hurricane is going to move into land in the next 24 hours. Tropical storm force winds on the outside edge of that.
Chaos geführt. In dem stockenden Verkehr war ein Bus in Brand geraten. Mehr als 20 Menschen starben. Der Bus sollte 45 meist ältere Flüchtende von Houston nach Dallas bringen. Eine der Hauptevakuierungsrouten, die ohnehin völlig überfüllt war, musste wegen des Unglücks gesperrt werden. Warum der Bus in Brand geriet, ist noch unklar.
Frühestens morgen gegen 14 Uhr deutscher Zeit soll Hurricane Rita im Süden der USA Land erreichen. Doch schon jetzt drückt der Sturm das Wasser in New Orleans über einige gerade geflickte Deiche. Rita hatte auf seinem Weg durch den Golf von Mexiko den Kurs geändert. Zunächst war Galveston, die Insel vor der Küste bei Houston, das Ziel. Nun rechnen die Meteorologen damit, dass Rita bei Port Arthur, etwa in der Mitte zwischen Galveston und New Orleans, auf Land trifft. Das dürfte den Sturm und die Flutwelle für die geplagte Stadt der Mississippi noch viel gefährlicher machen. Auch wenn Rita am Abend auf einen Hurrikan der Kategorie 3 herabgestuft wurde. Eberhard Pilz berichtet.
Es hört nicht auf in New Orleans. Starke Regenfälle und erste Sturmböen am Rand des kommenden Hurrikans sind schuld. Die Deiche, notdürftig geflickt nach der ersten Katastrophe, halten nicht. In einigen Stadtvierteln steigt das Wasser wieder. Das war meine größte Sorge, dass die provisorischen Abdichtungen weggespült werden. Jetzt kehrt die Flut zurück. Genau wegen dieser Gefahr hatten die Pioniere der Armee damit begonnen, nicht nur an den Deichen zu arbeiten, sondern die Kanäle in der Stadt abzuschotten. So sollten Barrieren entstehen, die das vom Sturm stetig ins Mississippi-Delta hinaufgetriebene Meerwasser blockieren sollten. Wir wollen den Rückstau verhindern. Dasselbe tun wir an den anderen Kanälen, wo es auch Dammbrüche gegeben hat. Zu spät. Niemand hatte damit gerechnet, dass die zweite Katastrophe so schnell nach der ersten New Orleans bedrohen würde. Wenigstens sind jetzt die Hilfsorganisatoren alarmiert. Präsident Bush ließ sich heute Morgen in Washington bei der Katastrophenschutzbehörde informieren, bevor er sich auf den Weg zum militärischen Kommandozentrum Nord machte. Diesmal will der Präsident alles richtig machen. Unser Job ist es, dabei zu helfen, dass die lokalen und die staatlichen Stellen gut zusammenarbeiten, damit Menschen gerettet werden und wieder auf die Beine kommen. Währenddessen durchquert die fliegende Messstation der Hurrikanjäger den Wirbelsturm Rita mehrmals am Tag. Windgeschwindigkeit, Temperatur, Luftdruck geben Aufschluss über Weg und Stärke. Die Intensität von Rita hat etwas nachgelassen, aber auch als Hurrikan der Kategorie 3 ist nur in der Stille im Auge des Sturms Rita als Naturereignis ein erhebender Anblick.
Stefan Pauli, Sie stehen vor uns inmitten des Sturms am Mississippi in New Orleans und ich sehe gerade, wir haben auch etwas Bildprobleme. Wie groß ist denn die Gefahr, dass die Dämme dort wieder brechen? Ja, nun haben wir das Bildsignal ganz verloren. Ja. Haben wir? Ja, wir haben ihn wieder.
Zuversichtlich, dass diese Dämme auch in Zukunft halten werden. Allerdings muss man sagen, der Mississippi hier hinter mir ist schon ganz grün. Das ist die Farbe des Seewassers und es wird immer mehr Meerwasser in den Mississippi hineingedrückt und so auch in die Kanäle. Und so wird auch immer mehr Wasser jetzt in die bereits überfluteten Stadtviertel wieder zurückfließen. Das ist wohl nicht mehr zu vermeiden.
Sind denn jetzt noch Menschen in diesen gefährdeten Stadtteilen?
Gott sei Dank nicht. Zum einen haben die Behörden sehr viel gelernt aus den Fehlern der Vergangenheit. Man hat sehr sorgfältig evakuiert. Gestern noch sind Sicherheitsleute von Haus zu Haus gegangen, haben geklopft. Und außerdem waren diese Häuser am höchsten überflutet und deshalb am letzten freigepumpt worden. Da konnte noch niemand hin. Die Häuser sind immer noch voller Schlamm und voller Schimmel. Da konnte niemand hin und diese Häuser werden vermutlich auch abgerissen werden. Deshalb ist diesmal wohl keine Gefahr für Menschen hier.
Tja, die Satellitenschüssel hat dann doch noch gehalten. Vielen Dank nach New Orleans, Stefan Pauli, und passen Sie gut auf sich auf. Und in Houston wartet Martin Leutke für uns auf Rita. Martin, stehen bei Ihnen denn immer noch Zehntausende in den kilometerlangen Autoschlangen weg von der Küste?
Also diese Staus, die gibt es immer noch, aber nicht mehr hier in der unmittelbaren Umgebung von Houston, sondern etwas weiter im Landesinneren, in Dallas zum Beispiel. Das ist dann nervig für die Menschen, die im Stau drinstehen, aber zumindest keine unmittelbare Gefahr mehr. Ansonsten hat sich hier das Leben fast auf den Nullpunkt zurückreduziert in Houston, in dieser viertgrößten Metropole der USA. Man sieht kaum noch Menschen auf der Straße, obwohl immer noch Zehntausende hier ausharren und auf den Sturm warten. Und ein paar von denen, die haben wir heute getroffen. Wer die Frisur von Lady Diana haben will, ist hier eigentlich genau richtig, nur nicht in den nächsten Tagen. Die Madranos machen ihren Laden dicht in letzter Minute aus Angst vor Rita, der auf Houston zureist. Verbarrikadieren und ausharren, was anderes bleibt ihnen nicht. Ich habe gestern versucht, aus der Stadt zu kommen, aber es ging nicht. Die Straßen waren so voll, dass wir umdrehen mussten. In 2 Stunden sind wir nur 3 Kilometer vorangekommen. Der Verkehr brach völlig zusammen. Aber selbst wer den Stau nicht scheut, hat ein anderes Problem: kein Benzin. In Houston sind die Lager leer, der Nachschub kommt nicht durch und doch stehen die Menschen Schlange. Wenn schon kein Benzin, dann wenigstens ein Überlebenspaket. Ich hole mir Wasser und Eis für die Kinder. Mein Gehaltscheck kam spät, deshalb komme ich erst heute dazu. Ja, und jetzt ist alles andere geschlossen, also warte ich hier. Ich habe Essen, ich habe einen Platz zu schlafen, ich habe alles, um den Sturm zu überstehen, bis auf ein kaltes Bier. Wer mehr Geld hat, konnte hier sein Glück versuchen am Flughafen von Houston, aber auch der war eine Sackgasse für viele. Seit 2 Stunden sind alle Flüge abgesagt und nicht jeder, der wollte, konnte vor Rita fliehen. Jetzt fliegen sie nicht mehr, der Flughafen ist zu. Ich hoffe nur, dass mein Vater noch irgendwie rauskommt aus dem Gebiet, dann bin ich glücklich. Es gibt keine Hotelbetten, keine Transportmöglichkeiten, also bleiben wir hier bis Montag oder Dienstag und dann können wir hoffentlich weg. Besonders gemütlich ist es nicht auf den Wartebänken, aber wenigstens sind sie hier sicher am Flughafen von Houston. Das haben sie anderen Zurückgebliebenen voraus.
Die Umgebung von Houston ist ja ein wichtiges Zentrum der amerikanischen Ölindustrie. Wenn die von Rita getroffen wird, welche Konsequenzen könnte das denn haben?
Also da gibt es die schlimmsten Befürchtungen, und zwar auf mehreren Ebenen. Zum einen auf der menschlichen Ebene, man musste 800 Ölplattformen evakuieren. 800, eine enorme Zahl mit Hubschraubern, teilweise unter abenteuerlichen Bedingungen. Und dann gibt es die Befürchtung der Umweltschützer, die sagen, also wenn da eine Pipeline bricht zum Beispiel oder wenn Auffangbecken bersten, in denen chemische Stoffe gelagert werden, dann kann es zu einer großen Verschmutzung kommen. Und dann gibt es natürlich noch diejenigen, die einfach schlicht und ergreifend aufs eigene Portemonnaie gucken und sagen, also wenn hier weitere Ölplattformen geschlossen werden, wenn also weniger Öl gefördert wird, dann merken wir das auch ganz schnell an steigenden Benzinpreisen und das spüren die Amerikaner dann natürlich auch im eigenen Geldbeutel.
Danke nach Houston, Martin Leutke.
Doesn't surprise me that these aren't that these are just sort of in the 40 mile an hour. That feels about right. The 80 mile an hour, wind, sustained wind, that is certainly of great concern, and 100 mile an hour wind gusts is that's among the strongest I've probably ever experienced. So that's something we'll just have to be prepared for and take it case by case. I think we want to check in. Sean Caleb's is down in Galveston, Aaron. Let's just check in with him. Sean, what are you finding out where you are?
I'm sorry, what was that last bit?
Just wondering if you have any new information about any of the stories we've been following.
Oh, yeah, well, basically the building collapse, they've just kind of moved on from that. This isn't the kind of evening that they want to stand out and try and clean up the streets. The fire is pretty much under control. We saw a number of fire engines within the last 20 minutes pull back into the emergency operations center here. It is just pitch black. The rain has picked up significantly. The wind that was blowing in very steadily from the northeast is now coming in a little bit more from the I would say the east or almost even the south right now. It has picked up somewhat, but still it's nothing. And again, I don't try to, it's not as intense as so many other people have experienced this evening. We're on the weak side of the hurricane, and in a world of expectations, certainly people here on Galveston Island for the last 48 hours really fear for the worst. Those vivid images of what happened in the Louisiana area fresh on everybody's mind. That's the reason so many people evacuated this area. I think a big concern is now as they move away from these disasters that they've had to deal with this evening, the fire that could have brought the whole block down, the flooding that certainly is going to come to large parts of this area. You can see this intense rain is just coming down. The bay is on one side, the Gulf of Mexico is on the other. We haven't got any kind of storm surge to speak of. The seawall is certainly doing its job, nothing splashing up on Seawall Avenue. But a big concern was the bay in the back. Basically, there's nothing to stop that from pouring over. Go ahead.
Sean, if I could just interrupt, Chad Myers has a tornado warning. I just want people to hear about it as soon as possible. Chad, what is it?
You know, so many times we focus on the eye wall, and there are other storms that are spinning on the outside. And here's the eye coming on shore. Cameron, you're getting winds to 100, 105 miles per hour. But farther up toward Baton Rouge, there is now a tornado warning for you. Many times in the outer bands, these storms actually begin to spin and make small tornadoes. I'm not talking F4s and F5s like you get in Kansas and Texas and Nebraska, but certainly F1s and 0s and 2s, which still could have wind gusts to 140 to 150. But that's for East Baton Rouge and West Baton Rouge parishes there, including the towns of Port Allen. The tornado indicated by Doppler radar, but it's expected to be near Baker by 1:05 Central Time. That's 5 minutes from now. If you're in that area, be taking cover at this time. Anderson?
Chad, earlier when I was talking to Sean about the seawall in Galveston, because last night when I was on that seawall with the mayor, I mean, we were getting wet. There were waves coming up over it, splashing all over the seawall. He's saying the water seems to have gone out. Why would that be?
Because the winds have been blowing out all day. As the storm got closer, your waves are still coming in. They're still trying to be a storm surge, but as the waves blow offshore, as the winds blow that water offshore, in fact, the water will recede. Now, as the storm goes by and those waves shift around, that water will certainly come back into the bay as well, and sometimes you can have a slosh back into the bay as all that water tries to return all at one time.
Sean, I don't know, were you able to hear that, Chad's explanation of that?
Yeah. Yeah, he actually brought that up a bit earlier in the evening, and it certainly makes sense. What I'm wondering, if Chad is still around, is as this storm continues to turn at any point, if I think it's going to be high tide very
I'm Shia Britansi at the CNN Center. Welcome to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Rita. CNN has reporters throughout the U.S. Gulf Coast where Rita is expected to come ashore. We now rejoin Newsnight State of Emergency on our sister network, CNN USA.
Like so many people had feared.
You know, it certainly could, but I doubt it. I think the heaviest storm surge is going to be on the right side of the eye as it moves into Louisiana. The storm surge map does show that most of this is actually going to be east of Port Arthur, east into Lake Charles. That's where the 10 to 14-foot storm surge will be. Port Arthur, right over to Holly Beach, Cameron, and all the way over to Lake Charles. That's your 14, maybe 18-foot storm surge. But Galveston, I think your storm surge will only be about 5 feet, maybe as much as 8 feet. And with a 17-foot wall, I think maybe you'll get splashing over it, but you're not going to get it breached.
I think one thing people are also concerned about, if indeed this is moving as slow as you said, if it rains a great deal, I presume that's also going to cause some flooding as well.
Sean, that is going to be probably the biggest story after this goes by. This storm, although it's moving at 12 miles per hour right now, gets to about Texarkana and literally stops. There's going to be a high pressure. It's going to kind of look like a big banana. And that high pressure is going to stop it from going east, stop it from going west, and stop it from going north. So it bumps into this bump. It bumps into this high, and it stops. And for 72 hours, it's raining here. And some computer models now putting out 25 inches of rain in the area from Port Arthur northward, right up the Sabine River, right into Texarkana, Shreveport, maybe as far west as Dallas, maybe as far east. Could be inches of unexpected rain in New Orleans before that storm finally just diminishes intensity and kind of washes out.
Wow, that is going to be miserable for the people here thinking that storm just sitting here for days and days and days. Chad, we're going to check in with you shortly. Sean, with you as well. Right now, let's go back to Aaron in New York.
Thank you. I was just thinking of what Sean was talking about the building collapse, wall collapsing of the building in Galveston. In all of these cities all along the coast, things are happening. And as Gary Tuckman mentioned, in fact, at some point when the light comes up tomorrow, they're going to look very different than they looked tonight. And we just have to wait and see how much damage has been done all along the Gulf. In Baytown, Texas tonight, Randy Kay, I guess it's early this morning now, Randy Kay is in Baytown. When last we saw you, you were basically just trying to hold your ground.
And that's exactly what I'm still trying to do, Aaron. It's hard to believe, you know, here in Baytown, we are about an hour west of Beaumont. And so it's really hard to believe that we're actually on the weaker side of the storm, because we're seeing some pretty hefty wind gusts right now. I talked to the city manager here in Baytown a short time ago, and he told me that right about this hour is when they were expecting gusts to get pretty high. They were expecting maximum gusts overnight tonight of about 80 miles an hour, they thought. So I don't think we're there yet, obviously. I think we have a ways to go, but it's certainly pretty strong right now. Believe it or not, we're in sort of a funky power situation here. The power in our hotel is back on, and even the power in a couple of signs around on the streets here is actually back on, which is very interesting. Also, the flagpoles here, they are still standing. They're 10 feet deep into the ground, although we did lose the Comfort Inn's flag, but we still have the United States flag and the Texas flag still there. Over here, we still have these palm trees. It's pretty hard to turn actually into the wind, but if you take a look at those palm trees, Aaron, you remember when we talked a little while ago, those palm trees certainly weren't blowing in the wind as wildly as they are actually now. So, and there's also, I know there's been a lot of talk about debris and things flying around in the night, and what we're hearing a lot of are just strange noises. We think a dumpster back there in the distance is being pushed actually by the wind, its doors swinging open, but also actually being pushed. We've seen the transponders going out. We're not only seeing the transponders and the lights in the sky turning bright blue, but we're also hearing them. So it is somewhat concerning out there. This is a community that has experienced many hurricanes over the years. Karla is something that they still talk about, Hurricane Karla back in 1961. And Aaron, it was a very different picture here back then. From what the fire marshal tells me, it was mostly rice fields, and those rice fields have now been replaced by subdivisions. So it's a very different picture here. Many of those people living in those subdivisions, though I'm told, did evacuate, which is very good news. And also the power plants and the oil refineries and the plants along the ship channel here, where Baytown sits on the Houston ship channel, that 50-mile stretch of waterway, about 200 plants. They also have shut down, trying to prepare just in case the Hurricane Rita comes in real strong, make sure there isn't any damage there. Aaron?
You've done a lot of reporting, actually, on the refinery situation, which is, for good reason, of great concern to people all over the country, because it impacts the price of gas, which will go up, and we'll see how much. It's not quite as simple. It actually is sort of simple to shut them down. It's not very simple to start them up.
Right. In fact, we talked to the manager of the Shell plant, and he told me there was another transformer that just blew. Sorry about that. He told me that in fact they shut down their plant in about 24 hours, but it could take them anywhere from 5 to 7 days to actually get the plant going again. And the other issue is, it depends on how much damage might occur out in the ship channel and whether or not they'll even be able to get the oil that they need, not only to refine, but also the oil that they need to actually run their operations. So they said they could be shut down anywhere from a week to a few months. It all depends on how much damage there is. And here in this area, more than 25% of the oil is produced for the world right from here, the gasoline.
Just so people are clear on this, the oil, the crude comes in on tankers, and it goes out on in pipelines?
That's correct. It goes out for different parts of the country and different parts of the world out by pipeline, but it comes in on these ships. And he said they can only run for about 5 days before they need more oil. So if that oil can't go in, we're really in trouble here. And
obviously it's quite windy where you are. It doesn't look to be as rainy as it's been in other scenes we've seen tonight.
No, it's not as rainy as other areas, but this is probably the most rain that we've seen. You know, there's been a lot of talk about this storm once it hits the land and it's going to stall over the area. We're not sure how much rain we're actually going to get here. They are expecting a storm surge of anywhere from 10 to 13 feet, they thought. They think they could get in some of the lower lying areas here in the Baytown area. They could get anywhere up to a foot of rain. But if you look out over into the parking lot area out there, I'm not sure if you can see it clearly, but the rain is certainly blowing out there just on the pavement. But you know, if you stand out here long enough, it hits you pretty hard. It feels like it's just kind of sort of like nails on your back if you keep your back into it, which is obviously the most preferable way to stand out here in a hurricane.
Randy, stay safe here. It's going to get tough for a couple of hours. Baytown is about 25 miles or so to the east of Houston. Miles O'Brien joins us for the first time tonight. Miles is in Lumberton. I guess we're letting Zarella dry off for a bit.
Yeah, Zarella is taking a break. This is really starting to whip here, Aaron. We're talking right now about 30, 40 knot gusts, and the eye wall, as you've been saying, as it comes across Sabine Pass, is about 90 miles away. So we are, as they say, it's about an 85-mile swath of hurricane force winds, and we're at the leading edge of the tropical force right now. So in the next few minutes, we're really going to get battering here, because we're told, as you know, that there's 120-mile-an-hour winds in that swath, 85 miles around the wall of Rita. The power is out here. We've had a generator, we thought, at the police station here. That's gone out. I just talked to some of the police officers. They say about 90% of this community of about 9,000 evacuated. They haven't heard a single call from anybody riding out the storm. We are about 30, 40 feet above sea level here, so we don't anticipate seeing any storm surge here, but the rain is just coming down in sheets now. I don't know what kind of rain Randy was experiencing there, but just sheets and sheets of rain, which is causing a lot of localized flooding here. I don't see any signs, just looking around here, of sign damage, but as we say, I'm just kind of on the leading edge of those strong hurricane force winds. This is the main street back here. We're kind of just watching for the usual kinds of things that go first, the signage and so forth. And so far, everything is intact here. But I think we're just at the beginning of what lies ahead here. It's going to be kind of a long haul over the next 3 hours, Aaron.
Yeah, actually, Miles, I've had a sense that we're sort of at the end of the beginning. That we're moving into a new phase of this. It's the middle phase. It's the nasty phase. It's going to go on for several hours. You're going to be right out in it. And that's sort of the moment we find ourselves in right now.
Yeah, you know, and I've been thinking about, as I woke up just a little while ago, trying to get a little bit of rest, we ran into earlier today much of the emergency services, the police and fire for Port Arthur and some of the communities down right on the coast there, where storm surge would be a real big problem. And they have evacuated all their equipment here, their fire trucks and their police officers and their police vehicles. They're going to ride out the storm in this part of the world, and then as soon as they feel it is safe, they're going to head back in. But as they said, that as they there were several hundred people who, against their better advice, and they literally told them to put their licenses in their socks so they could identify their bodies, decided to ride out this storm. And I just, thinking about what we're just experiencing, the edge of this, what that must be like 90 miles down, and more importantly, about 40 feet below us, it's hard to imagine what's going on right now.
Miles, it's good to have you with us for a while. Actually, we heard a report, I don't remember the city, but someone said, okay, well, if you want to stay here, you don't want to evacuate, write your Social Security number on your arm so that we can identify you if that need be. Gary Tuckman's in Beaumont, Texas. Beaumont's been battered. That's where Anderson is also. Beaumont's been battered for a good length of time here. Gary, it doesn't look any more pleasant right now.
No, Aaron, I would say at this point it's the worst we've seen so far. This is a meteorological maelstrom right now. All throughout downtown Beaumont, where we are now, shutters are coming off of buildings. Glass is breaking from office buildings. We see canopies from banks and a gas station nearby that have already come down. These are things we're used to seeing. But one thing I never get used to, no matter how many hurricanes we're in, is this sound. It's a sound that sounds like jet planes are flying above your head. And even though you know that's the sound of the hurricane moving in, your instinct is to look up and think, where's the airplanes? And obviously there's no airplanes flying, but it's a very eerie sound when you hear what sounds like airplanes. Behind me, something very interesting. There's a clock. The clock says 1:13 a.m., and that's what's amazing, that despite these conditions, which have continued to deteriorate, we've had now up to 80-mile-per-hour gusts here, the power is still on here in Beaumont. This is one of the few times I ever remember this much rain, this much wind, and this much power. It has now been raining constantly hard for 10 hours since 3 o'clock Central Time this afternoon. And, of course, we aren't even at the worst of it yet. According to Chad, that's still a couple of hours away here for Beaumont. But the conditions are very bad. We haven't seen, except for one guy on a bicycle about an hour ago, anyone on the streets whatsoever. No cars coming down. We're in the heart of downtown Beaumont right now, where normally this area where I'm standing right now, according to the people who run the stores in this block and the restaurants, there are usually 50 to 60 bikers out here. There's a couple of biker bars, some restaurants, some dance clubs. And right now, of course, with these conditions, it's eerily quiet. We are glad to see that there really is nobody out here. Aaron, back to you.
Just because of the video phone that you're using, it's a little hard to tell exactly where you are. Are you in the middle of the street? Are you standing right basically in the middle of a street?
And that's a good point, Aaron. Right now, I am standing in the middle of a cobblestone street that at night becomes a pedestrian wall and a motorcycle area. So, yeah, this is the middle of the street where normally on a Friday night you would never be able to stand because motorcycles and people would be coming up and down this road.
Gary, thank you very much. Gary Tuckman, who is in Beaumont, Texas. Gary's covered a bunch of these hurricanes out of our bureau in Atlanta. Sean Caleb's is in Galveston, Texas tonight. It's been a very active night, though we suspect that when light comes across the Gulf tomorrow, we'll find out about a lot of things like you've experienced, wall collapses, a fire over here, a roof coming off over there.
Yeah, it's kind of odd because I'm sure we're going to see damage that is this bad or worse in a lot of the areas. It's just that perhaps we've been lucky. We went in to ask the officials the latest information, and when they went in, that's when the firefighters are running out of the elevator, and just using instinct, we followed them and to see where they were heading, and that's how that happened. The building collapsed. Basically, the authorities just pulled up to where that was on 23rd Street. They got out, took a look at it, got back in their vehicles, and left. At this point, there's really nothing else they could do. They didn't even bother cleaning the streets. There's so much debris out there. Rain has been coming down very steadily for a long time. The ground's simply saturated. At some point in the near future, we're going to get to the point where there's really nowhere else for this water to go. I think that's when we're going to start seeing some flooding in the higher areas. When I say higher, the highest point on this island is only about 22 feet. But we know there's flooding on the east and western area that are not protected by that flood wall or seawall that extends 10 miles on this barrier island. It's about 31 miles long. And on the bay side, where this wind, as Chad has been explaining to us, is blowing in, we've had some people come back in, and they tell us that already flood water is up pretty much about calf level on some of those streets back in there. So certainly that's got to be very disappointing news. And we have talked to, I'd say, probably a dozen families that indicated they were going to stay here for one reason or another, including some that live near the bay. And there was one couple, they wanted to leave, but yesterday they saw just how bad the interstates were. They don't have air conditioning in the vehicle. It's broken at this point. And the wife in the family has difficulty breathing, so they chose not to try to make a run into Houston or Dallas or something like that to ride this out. They were somewhat concerned about it. They did everything that they could, and they are close to a shelter. But the real concern is that this water starts moving up into there. No one wants to see anything like we saw in the New Orleans area, although certainly from what Chad and everybody have been telling us this evening, that's not going to be a concern, but it has to be terrifying for some of those families that are trying to ride this out. We've talked about the noises we hear out here. Well, in a house with maybe a candle and things hitting the side of the house, maybe shingles blowing off, it's got to be a very, very, very tough evening.
I suspect that's true. If somebody can check on what the weather's like in Houston. Houston's only about 50 or so miles from Galveston. I'd be interested to know what the weather is like up there. You filed a story for us yesterday, I believe, about a young man, a 30s or so fellow who lived in a high-rise, and he'd sort of gotten his six-packs and his chips and his food, and he was going to ride it out. Do we know anything about that building and whether those buildings are okay?
Yeah, his name's Philip Klinge, and he is in a building not really far from where we are now, and he was only concerned about the storm surge. And from everything we've been hearing, it's not even a factor at this point. That building is basically a fortress in the way he describes it. And this is a guy who is in the building business. He understands a bit about it. He wasn't that concerned about weather like this. If they would have had Hurricane 5, Category 5, then it would have been a much greater concern for him. But this is somebody who was going to pull those aluminum shutters closed, lock himself in, and just wait till the power went off. And if things did get bad, if they had winds of 120, 130 miles an hour that maybe peeled those back, he had a bedroom well inside, and he was just going to hunker down in there. Is that word hunker down I was trying not to use. But I'm sure that we tried to call him earlier, but cell service is almost non-existent here. We didn't reach him. We tried to call about 4 of the people we have spent time with. The only person we could reach was someone with the Galveston Independent Public School District. The school district here has its own police entity, which is responsible for overseeing the shelter. And to give you an idea of how many people left this island of 60,000 people, a few hours ago there were only 61 people in that shelter. So really a good indication that people did heed the warnings. They did see the pictures in Louisiana, and they got to safety.
Sean, thank you very much. Sean Caleb's in Galveston. We were wondering about the situation in Houston. Houston is about 50 miles or so from Galveston, a little bit mostly to the north. It's not an awful night there, and it's not a pleasant night there. Peak winds at about 51 miles an hour, and it looks pretty rainy. And the other thing you notice about Houston, which is, after all, the 4th largest city in the country, it's empty. I mean, there's nobody out there tonight at 1:15, 1:20 almost in the morning Central Time. We see one car moving down the street in Houston, Texas tonight. So a lot of people left Houston yesterday, as you saw, and they're getting whacked. They're not getting whacked like Anderson's getting whacked down in Beaumont, and the people in Lake Charles are going to get whacked by this thing. But it's not an altogether pleasant night. 50-mile-an-hour winds, peak winds, are not pleasant. Jay Osborne is a business owner, a Texan. He's in, it's Port O'Connor, Texas, isn't it, Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
And what's the weather like there? You're a little bit west-south of Galveston, sort of between Corpus Christi and Galveston, right?
Yes, sir.
What's it like?
It's blowing about 10, 15 mile an hour. It's not too bad.
10, 15 mile an hour sounds like a perfectly pleasant night. You almost want to go out and fly a kite or something compared to what other people are having. Is it raining hard?
No, no rain at all. We got pretty lucky, actually.
That's remarkable. What do you do for a living, sir?
We have a restaurant here in Port O'Connor, and I have some trucks. 18-wheelers.
Is the restaurant open?
No, we closed down a couple of days ago. We spent a couple of days getting ready and let the employees, they all took off, and we were evacuating, and we saw it looked like it was going to miss us, so we just hung around.
This time you guessed right.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Connor, thanks for joining us. We're happy for you that while other people are going to have a lot of cleaning up to do, it sounds like things at your end of the world are pretty good. Chad Myers in Atlanta, here's my question. Yeah. Port O'Connor isn't really that far from Galveston. I mean, it's not like 150 miles away or something, but the weather's altogether different.
Yeah, it's probably 120 miles away, though. Yeah.
It's that far? Okay.
It is, and obviously the winds have been coming offshore, and if the winds are coming from offshore, we talk about this too, about the bad side and the easy side, there's more friction on the land, obviously, more trees, more hills, more buildings, so you don't get as much wind if you have friction compared to this wind just ripping right off the water. And talk about ripping off the water. See that white dot right there? That's about Cameron or Calcasieu Pass. They just had a wind gust there measured by an automated station of 112 miles per hour. So that's one side of the storm to the other. 112, the highest gust so far. Aaron?
Just the length, I guess length is the right word, the length of the storm from west to east is roughly how long? Now, I was just playing with numbers about an hour ago, and I thought around 200 miles. So a little less than that.
Yeah, that's probably the length of the hurricane force winds, or even the, let's say, 60-mile-per-hour winds from one side to another, at least 200 miles. I'm going to go ahead and switch my sources real quick and go back to that map that we had of Port O'Connor, because that was kind of a telling map to say that, look, this was already all the way to New Orleans, and this is almost all the way to Bryan, Texas. 375 miles we just measured. Our meteorologist Dave Hennon put that on there for me. Thank you, Dave. There's almost 400 400 miles. And earlier today, Aaron, just because as a side note, it was raining in places like Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and Tampa in one of those feeder bands that was still attached to this storm. So that's another 600 miles from here that this storm has spread out its arms, or its tentacles, if you will. There now you see that feeder band now is east of Panama City. It's just such a large storm all the way to Shreveport and obviously well into the Gulf of Mexico where we can't see. There are probably showers in here, but the radars won't go that far.
And just again, the one other thing about this storm, once we get past tonight and we do the cleanup tomorrow, we do it. It's not like I'm going to be out there doing it, or for that matter you are. The fact is that there's a whole nother concern, which is days, literally days of rain.
Well, if you have if it's 400 miles across from one side to the other, and it sits here and it moves itself right to about Shreveport, Texarkana, and it stops, literally stops. There's almost a banana-shaped high pressure, and I don't want to think people start thinking silly, but it's got a loop on the west side, a top, and then a loop on the east side, and that big, almost kidney bean, I guess, better description, kidney bean shaped high pressure won't allow it to go any farther. It won't allow it to go west because there's a high there too, won't allow it to go east because there's a piece there too, and it's going to sit here and rain for 4 days. Now, there's not going to be 100-mile-per-hour winds for 4 days. The winds will be 20, 25. But if you have 25 inches of rain, does it really matter?
It doesn't matter that much.
No.
That's the truth. Thank you. Get back to you in a minute. Miles O'Brien's in Lumberton, Texas. Miles will anchor American Morning there in a few hours. In the meantime, you can see, this is really the best wide shot we've had out of there in a while. It doesn't look very pleasant, buddy.
No, it's coming in. The rain is horizontal and in sheets. And what Chad was talking about this rain, I think that's going to be the real problem here. I've already standing in a pretty deep puddle. The flooding is really starting to happen here. You know, and part of the reason we came here, Aaron, was that this is, 30, 40 feet above sea level. We thought we'd be protected against the storm surge, but localized flooding as a result of this rain is another matter entirely. I've been using the wind gauge here. The sustained winds right now, about 40 miles an hour. Chad can double check me on that one. Gusts a little bit more. I don't know if you can see that flag behind me there. Since we last were on the air, Aaron, just a few minutes ago, it was intact, and now it is, Old Glory's a bit shredded here on Main Street in Lumberton. That lies ahead. This is really just a small taste of what is coming, and really just a fraction of the kinds of winds that we ultimately anticipate here. As we say, like a lot of places up and down the coast here, people heeded those evacuation warnings. We're told 90% of this town has moved up even to higher ground, but there still are stragglers, and there are stragglers in places like Port Arthur. And on this dark and windy and rainy night with that huge storm surge and this terrible storm, you have to think about them, Aaron.
We think about all people who, for whatever reason, either because of their work or because they're stubborn or because they can't get out, are stuck in all of this tonight, and they're about to get the worst of it. I mean, we're really on the edge of the worst of it, and we hope everybody makes it through. Your own situation there, you seem quite out in the open.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I'm standing in front of the City Hall and Police Department in Lumberton, and they've been kind enough to shelter us here. And they assured us that they felt that this was a good place to be. Out here on Main Street, though, that's a different story entirely. As you can see, going down Main Street there, that wind just whipping along there. Sheets and sheets of rain, and even as I speak, it just is picking up. You can really feel the power of that storm here. The good news is, although I just saw a car drive by, I don't know who that was. I think it might have been one of the police officers. I haven't seen much evidence of anybody out and about trying to see what this storm is all about. I think the lessons of Katrina are on people's minds here. You know, people here, a lot of people here remember Hurricane Karla back in 1961, but since then, they really haven't had a direct hit here, but places like Sabine Pass, Port Arthur, Lake Charles, the direct hit is happening as we speak.
Pretty much. Just for people who aren't familiar, Lumberton's pretty much small town Texas. 10,000 or so people, give or take, right?
Yeah, great town. Perfect, you know, quintessential Texas town. That's a good way of describing it. Very neighborly, but also a little bit of Texas stubbornness here. The people that have held out despite what, you know, you described a moment ago. You know, put your Social Security number on your arm in indelible ink, or put your license in your sock in case we have to recover your body. And they want to stick it out. That is certainly a typically Texan response, I would guess. But this is, you know, we're 15 miles north of Beaumont, so we're a little bit higher, a little more inland than where Anderson is right now. And this is largely a bedroom community for Beaumont and the oil industry that exists there.
Just hang in there. We'll get stay safe there for a bit. Your workday is just quite literally just beginning. Miles and Soledad will be handling American Morning coming up in a few hours from now here on CNN. Ted Rowlands is in New Orleans. The story of this day, or I guess a Friday, really began in New Orleans with a lot of rain and a levee break. You look like it's a breezy night in New Orleans, not at all bad, which is good news for the Army Corps because they can go in and deal with the levees tomorrow.
Yeah, very good news for us. Tonight, there hasn't been much rain for the last few hours, but the winds are kicking up a bit. It started very poorly today in New Orleans. A lot of people very nervous because at 10 o'clock this morning, much earlier than expected, there was a breach in a levee that protected the 9th Ward, and the 9th Ward is completely flooded tonight because of that breach. All eyes are now on the rest of the levee system, and engineers are keeping their fingers crossed that Lake Pontchartrain can be held at bay. A storm surge is expected later or throughout the evening. They're watching that very closely. At this point, though, I just talked to a policeman. He says there's no reason to be concerned at this point, and so far, so good here in New Orleans.
I'm Shia Bratansi at the CNN Center. Welcome to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Rita. CNN has reporters throughout the U.S. Gulf Coast where Rita's strongest winds have now come ashore. We rejoin Newsnight State of Emergency on our sister network, CNN USA.
Ward.
Well, water also went all the way out to St. Bernard Parish, but this is an area that was completely devastated after Katrina. So in comparison to what has happened, you know, what damage was done, probably none when you consider that the entire area was already pretty much wiped out. This is on the eastern side. The western side, which encompasses downtown, and the rest of the city of New Orleans is relatively dry. There has been some spillage with some surge, but for the most part, the levees have held, and they are watching them very closely, keeping their fingers crossed that will be the case throughout the night tonight.
Very few people would have any reason to go back to the 9th Ward, to be perfectly honest. I mean, if you remember the pictures of New Orleans, it's one of the areas that was the most devastated in the days after Katrina. In other parts of the city, do you see activity tonight?
Most of the city is vacant. There's a lot of military personnel, a lot of law enforcement folks from around the country that have been working the search and rescue and helping to rebuild the city. And of course, a lot of media still hanging around here. But for the most part, the city has been cleared out. There was mandatory evacuations, of course, in place. Some people got out and are hunkered down in their homes. There's not a lot of activity out in the streets, though. We're in the French Quarter here, and we're just seeing a lot of military folks milling about, but that's about it.
Ted, thank you very much. Ted Rowlands in the Big Easy tonight, where tomorrow or later today, in fact, the Army Corps of Engineers will try and repair as best they can the levees that were breached today. We talked what now seems like quite a while ago to Chad Myers joins us, to someone with the Army, a brigadier general with the Army Corps, and he thought they'd be able to make those repairs if the weather cooperated, and it sounds like the weather probably will cooperate.
At least there won't be more rain on top of what they had. The real levee problem, Aaron, was that the wind was blowing from the east-southeast for hours, literally 24 to 36 hours. And it's just like, this is the reason why we have El Nino. If the wind blows from one direction in the Pacific Ocean for a long time, that warm water piles up on the western coast of South America and Central America. Well, the wind was piling the water up into Lake Borgne, which is that lake right there, that one right there, and then it was moving into Lake Pontchartrain. It was filling all of the levees, filling all of this low bayou area that was being protected by these levees, and obviously a couple of them failed. They were obviously built for maybe 4 or 5 foot storm surge protection, and the storm surge that we know of was 6 to 7 feet as that water kept coming in. Now this is a different type of storm surge, still part of the storm, but this is was like acting like a catcher's mitt. If you just think all this water coming in, it was just catching it, and then obviously those levees didn't hold. Back out to the west of there, though, we've had some severe weather all the way up to Baton Rouge with the tornado warning that just expired about 4 minutes ago. It has not been extended. So I assume that the storm, as it moved on by, which is probably that one right there, it actually did not produce a tornado, or they would have extended that tornado warning. But obviously there is still more weather in Louisiana that we're not focusing on because it's the eye, and the eye itself is still way back out to the east and the west of here, rather, from Port Arthur. Now this is the Louisiana radar. Now we just popped on. Thank you very much, Dave. This will be the Houston radar, I believe, and the eye wall itself now coming on shore. Probably another 45 minutes to an hour, the Hurricane Center will be able to call landfall somewhere right here in Louisiana. You don't get landfall when the eye wall comes on shore. You get landfall when the center of the eye comes on shore, and that's probably going to be Cameron, Louisiana, or someplace pretty close.
We're actually on the right side of the screen. We see that other computer-generated picture of the hurricane, and the eye there still seems to be clearly formed, kind of tightly formed, but looking at the radar map, we don't see it at all. Is that just the difference in the two maps?
You're talking about the satellite picture itself sometimes?
I guess so, yeah. I guess that's what's in the lower right.
Right, exactly. Okay, but you will notice that even on that satellite picture, that where is it? Right there. That the bottom part of the eye is not as deep. It's not as dark, and so therefore you're not seeing the convection wrapping around it. Typically, what happens when a storm gets close to land, Aaron, is that it'll just gobble up a little bit of dry air. That dry air comes off the hill country. It came off Corpus Christi, and it came in and it was gobbled up into the storm. And there, you see right here. See how there's not as much purple in there, so there's no convection really going on in there. The hardest part of the storm right now is on the purple side, and that's where it's raining. And I'll switch the maps, and that's where it's raining. Absolutely makes perfect sense.
It does to me.
Well, to me.
It does. By now it does to me too, and that's the wonderful thing about it. Thank you, Chad. Sean Caleb's over in Galveston, Texas tonight, and kind of been a long night, but you're hanging in there.
Yeah, and I guess a hint of good news, I'd say within the last 10 minutes, I saw 2 large fire engines go down the street back toward the convention center, so we're trying to find out, but presumably those last embers in that one fire, now we should probably revisit that a bit because it's been a few hours since we talked about it in any detail, but hopefully that is all under control now, because it's just simply been pouring here now for the last hour, so you can probably see it through the lights pretty well, coming down pretty vertical fashion right now, but periodically the winds come in and it blows across up pretty well. But really, I think tomorrow when we have a chance to take a look at this, as we're going to do with so much of this story, and talk with the fire chief, there's probably going to be a real story of heroes that are coming out of this. The fact that they were able to get to that area, were able to at least control the fires that destroyed that one building and severely damaged the others, and keep those embers from spreading, because the fire chief who we spoke with said that embers were starting small fires on some of those other buildings, some of those other homes in that area, and this is an area considered quite trendy, and so they were able to knock that down pretty quick. But as this rain just continues to linger and linger and linger, you have to wonder also not so much about the Gulf of Mexico, the seawall doing its job, but boy, over on the bay side, people are already talking about some floodwaters coming up in the streets, and if Chad's right and it's just going to pour for the next 3 days, there's just nowhere for this water to go on this barrier island. There's nowhere for it to run off. It's going to get pretty bad.
And just again, this were a couple of old homes that went up, and a commercial building, if I remember correctly.
Exactly, two what are being termed historic homes went up, burned, at least one of those destroyed, and then one business. And it was also right in the shadow of a very large, I believe it was a Bank South building. They said close to 25 floors. So while it went up and basically turned that whole block bright orange when the storm was really coming into this area, almost surreal. We asked a firefighter, how do you battle something like this in the middle of a hurricane with no power, limbs down, power lines down? It just boggles the mind. Also, we asked him about any kind of cause at this point, and that basically what they told us, at this point, they have no idea. They just wanted to keep it from spreading. They'll go in and do the forensic work on that sometime in the future.
You are still in the teeth of this storm as the eye wall, the western eye wall, passes over Port Arthur probably in the next 20 minutes and over you in the next hour to hour and 20 minutes, where the center of the eye right down here will go ahead and keep it moving forward. The center of the eye not quite on land, but it'll be very close to Cameron, Louisiana, when it comes on shore here, probably in about 45 minutes or so.
Will, is Anderson able to hear us?
Yeah, Aaron, I hear. I can tell you, it helps to know. I mean, one of the worst things about standing here, and I was listening to Gary talk about, you don't feel so alone, but there is this loneliness in the dark. I mean, we do have people around us, the crew, thank goodness, and a connection to the outside world. But there are so many people who, I mean, it is pitch black, and beyond our camera lights, you just cannot see anything. And it is so, and every now and then there is a sound, it's cliche to say it's like a freight train. It's also at times like a person screaming, and you hear it just out there in the dark, and it is very eerie. You don't know exactly where it's coming from. You don't know exactly what's causing it. But it is a very strange feeling. You feel very much on the edge of the world, and so it helps to hear someone like Chad say, it's an hour and a half left of the worst. The worst.
I think we froze up.
Yeah, Chad, an hour and a half of the worst, and then right. It doesn't go, bingo, it's good again, right?
No, it doesn't. But remember, we talked about this at length, Aaron, that there's really only a top half of the eye. We're not really going to have a secondary slam of the bottom half of the eye because we lost it with some dry air that pulled into the storm, and that's where the dry air is right now, right in the bottom half of the eye. So a lot of times, if you really do get run over by the eye, your winds will be coming in from the east. They will stop. That gets eerie, and then the wind comes the other direction, coming in from the west. We're not going to have a huge westerly component after the storm goes by Beaumont. In fact, the winds are going to die off rather quickly, although the wind gust in Beaumont was just 81 miles per hour. New 2 o'clock update, a few minutes early, 2 o'clock Central Time. If you're keeping track, 29.6, 93.7, Aaron, and it's about 10 miles south-southeast of Sabine Pass. That means that the storm is going to make landfall within the next hour because it's making the northwestern progress at 12 miles per hour. Landfall is expected in the next hour or so here. Have maximum sustained winds reported from Dave. Thank you very much. Still 120 miles per hour. Searim State Park reported a wind gust to 101, and we know Calcasieu Pass reported a wind gust to 112. That's in this most dangerous part of the eye wall right there.
Mit voller Wucht. Hurrikan Rita trifft östlich von Houston auf die Küste von Texas.
Die Nachrichten des Tages. Heute mit Petra Gerster.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Die ganz große Katastrophe ist Hurrikan Rita offenbar nicht geworden. Auf seinem Weg ins Landesinnere hat er an Kraft verloren und ist nun viel schwächer als Katrina vor 4 Wochen. Doch auch dieser Wirbelsturm hat es in sich. Meterhohe Flutwellen und sintflutartiger Regen brachen über die Küsten von Louisiana und Texas herein. Am schlimmsten betroffen dort Lake Charles und Port Arthur. In New Orleans strömen schon wieder die Wassermassen in Stadtviertel, die gerade erst leergepumpt worden waren. Und in Houston brach Feuer aus.
Rasender Sturm, peitschender Regen und eine hohe Flutwelle. Es war schlimm heute Nacht an der Golfküste von Texas, aber nicht so verheerend wie befürchtet. Die Stadt Galveston nicht im Meer versunken. Viele Gebäude sind beschädigt worden in den weitgehend von der Bevölkerung verlassenen Geisterstädten. Mehrere Großbrände brachen aus, weil Strommasten umgerissen wurden. Die Feuerwehren und die anderen Rettungskräfte waren zur Stelle, diesmal auch die vielgescholtene nationale Katastrophenschutzbehörde mit Konvois. Die Stadt Beaumont bekam die volle Wucht des Hurrikans zu spüren. Ich lag im Bett, alle Fenster gingen zu Bruch, Glassplitter überall. Ich wurde praktisch aus dem Bett geweht und brachte mich dann in Sicherheit. Weil die Evakuierung rechtzeitig begonnen hatte, waren die Notunterkünfte für knapp 3 Millionen Menschen besser organisiert. Zu ihnen sprach heute früh der Gouverneur. Wir wissen noch nicht, wie groß die Schäden sind. Wir finden das gerade heraus. Bis dahin haben Sie Geduld, bleiben Sie, wo Sie sind. Der Präsident verbrachte die Nacht in einem Militärkommandozentrum. Er will zeigen, dass er sich kümmert, dass er diesmal alles richtig macht. Es ist wichtig, dass die Bürger verstehen, obwohl der Sturm vorbeigezogen ist, bleibt die Situation gefährlich wegen des Hochwassers. In New Orleans ist es vor allem der starke Regenfall, der das Flutwasser steigen lässt. Die am tiefsten gelegenen Stadtviertel werden wieder überschwemmt, weil die Deiche bereits gestern an einigen Stellen gebrochen waren. Es halten sich nicht mehr viele Menschen in diesen Häusern auf, einige wurden per Hubschrauber gerettet. Es wird Tage dauern, bis ein klares Bild über die Katastrophenschäden vorliegt. Bisher werden keine Zerstörungen in den Raffinerien, von Bohrinseln und aus den Chemiefabriken in den betroffenen Küstenstreifen gemeldet. Noch ist die Flut das größte Problem.
In New Orleans, der schon von Katrina gebeutelten Stadt, jetzt unser Korrespondent Stefan Pauli. 2 Dämme sind schon gebrochen. Läuft die Stadt denn jetzt schon wieder voll, Stefan?
Zumindest in den Bereichen, wo die 2 Dämme gebrochen sind. Es ist ein Armenviertel und ein Industriegebiet. Dort waren die reparierten Dämme genau an den Stellen gebrochen, wo sie das letzte Mal vor 4 Wochen schon durchgebrochen waren. Die anderen reparierten Dämme halten allerdings. Die Innenstadt und das French Quarter, das Touristenviertel, sind einigermaßen trocken geblieben. Das heißt, die ganz große Katastrophe ist auch hier vorbeigegangen an der Stadt. Allerdings 50 Kilometer weiter westlich von hier beim Lake Charles, da stehen die Häuser bis zum Giebel im Wasser und dort weiß man noch gar nicht, ob Menschen zu Schaden gekommen sind. Wir hoffen alle, dass es diesmal mit der Evakuierung auch dort geklappt hat. Dort hat es so fürchterlich geregnet und ein bisschen nördlich von hier auch. Und wir rechnen in 2 Stunden mit dem nächsten größeren Regen, die Katrina nochmal hier über New Orleans runterdrücken wird. Dann kann es noch dichter werden, dann kann es noch problematischer werden. Und vor allem, wenn das ganze Wasser aus dem Landesinneren nachher den Mississippi runterfließt, dann kann es sein, dass dort die Deiche noch einmal überflutet werden. Das wird aber erst in 1, 2 Tagen sein. Erst dann werden wir wirklich wissen, ob New Orleans davongekommen ist.
Vielen Dank, Stefan Pauli. Schalten wir weiter zu Martin Leutke, der in Houston ist. Houston, das ja schon Schlimmes befürchtet hatte. Martin, wie sieht es denn jetzt tatsächlich in der Stadt aus?
Also man atmet durch in Houston, nachdem Hurricane Rita jetzt weitergezogen ist über die Stadt hinweg und die Stadt doch relativ verschont hat. Zwar sind hier etwa 1 Million Menschen ohne Strom und hinter uns sind den ganzen Vormittag über Transformatoren in die Luft geflogen mit einem lauten Knall und einem Feuerwerk, das sich daraus entwickelt hat. Aber größere Schäden gab es nicht. Die Menschen, die hier geblieben sind, sind wohl verschont worden. Aber auch wir wissen eben nicht, wie es in anderen Teilen von Texas aussieht. Weiter runter zur Küste, in Port Arthur zum Beispiel. Da erreichen uns immer wieder stündlich neue Informationen, dass es dort enorme Schäden gegeben haben soll durch Hurricane Rita. Noch kommt man dort kaum hin. Die Hubschrauber können nicht starten, weil es zu windig ist und zu regnerisch ist. Ja, und dann gibt es immer noch die große Gefahr des Regens. Stefan Pauli jetzt gerade eben schon angedeutet, auch bei uns in Texas natürlich. Denn es gibt Meteorologen, die tatsächlich befürchten, dass Hurricane Rita quasi stehen bleibt auf dem Land und der gesamte Regen aus diesem Hurricane auf einen Ort runterfällt. Das würde so viel Regen bedeuten, wie in Deutschland in etwa in einem ganzen Jahr fällt. Und das hätte natürlich massive Überschwemmungen zur Folge. Also noch ist die Gefahr nicht gebannt, auch hier in Texas nicht.
Ja, vielen Dank auch Ihnen, Martin Leutke. Und mehr...
Die Küste von Galveston aus der Luft. Das Gebiet ist überflutet. Viele Häuser haben dem Hurrikan nicht standgehalten. Bereits in der Nacht haben Feuerwehrleute in der Innenstadt von Galveston gegen mehrere Brände angekämpft. Die Windböen haben das Feuer rasend schnell verbreitet. Der Regen hat gegen die Flammen nicht geholfen. US-Präsident Bush kommt nach Texas. In der texanischen Hauptstadt Austin will er sich über das Ausmaß der Schäden informieren. Versagen wie beim Hurrikan Katrina vor 4 Wochen will Bush sich nicht nochmal vorwerfen lassen. Bush erfährt von den Hilfskräften eine erste Bilanz. Hurrikan Rita hat Schäden in Milliardenhöhe angerichtet. Und Hunderttausende Haushalte sind jetzt ohne Strom.
Soweit das Auge reicht, schlammige Brühe dort, wo einst Städte waren, Häuser standen, Menschen lebten. Bis zu 5 Meter hohe Überflutungen, so sieht die Küstenregion zwischen Texas und Louisiana nach Rita aus. Statt Häuser nur noch Sperrholz und Müll. In Orten wie Cameron, Port Arthur oder Lake Charles heißt es für die Menschen ganz von vorne anfangen. Ich werde die Überreste meines Hauses zusammensuchen, aber noch kann ich nicht zurück. Das Wasser steht zu hoch. Millionen müssen ohne Strom auskommen. Es wird Wochen dauern, das marode Netz von Überlandleitungen zu reparieren. Ohne Strom kann aber auch die Ölindustrie nicht produzieren. 16 Raffinerien in Texas bleiben geschlossen. Die Schäden zwar weniger dramatisch als befürchtet, der Ölpreis aber nach wie vor hoch. Der Präsident um Schadensbegrenzung bemüht. Er weiß, steigen die Benzinpreise, sinkt sein Ansehen. Er reagiert. Die Menschen müssen wissen, wir verstehen die Situation. Wir greifen daher die strategischen Ölreserven an, um Engpässe zu überbrücken, die die Konsumenten belasten könnten. Allein Louisiana will 34 Milliarden $ Wiederaufbauhilfe von der Bush-Regierung. Unklar, woher das Geld bei leeren Kassen und hoher Verschuldung kommen soll. Katrina und Rita vorüber, doch für den Präsidenten beginnen die Probleme.
About the other one that's a little shorter. Here's what we're going to do. Move it around a little bit. That thing, when you have your right shoulder harness, right? I get a trick for you on Sunday morning. I'll be basic. Two straps. Every Sunday I've been charging you. I'll put the two bag inside of the strap. Most of them are carrying the load for you. Yeah, yeah. Bless you.
start-stop button. Actually, these two buttons are identical to the red and green buttons on the front of the panel. Just for convenience, if you're having to be far away or using.
Can the unit be started without the remote start-stop connected?
It can be for the self-test. It's actually testing that connection in that port. It needs to connect. And again, the procedure calls out the use of the front panel since we'll be standing in front of it. But at any time, these could be used.
Protocol ready light on. It's green.
Yes.
Okay. At local operation.
Local operation.
Now, I will read through all of this. You will be pushing the protocol ID button. Okay, and when you do, hold it until it says FF.
Okay. Button. Stop. Continue.
Press. Ah. Oh. Now I held it, but I see it's not required.
No, it is a push button. It doesn't do anything either way, but for convenience, you can just press it once and then do its protocol.
Okay. But if you forget that, pulse current display to finish flashing. Verify protocol ready light is on. It's green. Check protocol pause stop light is off. Protocol pause stop.
Pause stop off.
Error lights off.
Error lights off.
Okay. Switch main power off. Okay. On the HRF rack, switch payload power start stop button. This is the start stop button. Remember, on that pull out, it should. And so
it gets.
I guess some of the old ones and bad already got this is actually a whole lot easier to do on Orbital. You know, you can like go into the node and do it. Go on there. That's right. Okay, there's a pocket for them in here now.
Good evening, everyone. This is Mission Control Houston. This is NASA Television's live coverage of the Expedition 12 cruise launch to the International Space Station. A Russian Soyuz rocket stands ready to launch 55 minutes from now at 10:55 p.m. Central Time. That's 9:55 a.m. Saturday at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in southern Kazakhstan, about 1,200 miles or approximately 2,000 kilometers southeast of Moscow. Aboard are Expedition 12 Commander William Mcarthur and Expedition 12 Flight Engineer and Soyuz Commander Valery Tokarev, along with spaceflight participant Gregory Olson. Olson will fly to the station for an 8-day mission as part of a commercial contract with the Russian Federal Space Agency. The Soyuz capsule was mated to its booster 3 days ago, and the Soyuz rocket, which stands 162 feet tall and weighs 680,000 pounds, was transported by rail car to the launch pad at dawn Thursday. That pad is the same one used 44 years ago to support the launch of Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space. Once launched, Tokarev as Soyuz commander and Mcarthur as the onboard Soyuz flight engineer will oversee several orbital correction burns using thrusters on the spacecraft to adjust its altitude relative to that of the International Space Station. After docking and hatch opening, the new crew will learn everything it can about the station from the current crew, Expedition 11 Commander Sergei Krikalev and Flight Engineer John Phillips, who have been aboard since April. This is the 4th flight into space for Mcarthur, who will also serve as NASA's space station science officer. Mcarthur has made 2 previous visits to space stations, one to the Russian Mir space station and one to the International Space Station. He conducted 2 spacewalks while at the International Space Station on the STS-92 mission in 2000 that set the stage for the arrival of the first expedition crew nearly 5 years ago. You can see Mcarthur on the right side of this view. In the center is Tokarev. It is the 2nd flight for Tokarev, who flew aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery on STS-96, a joint mission to the International Space Station in 1999. This will be the first flight for Olsen, seen here on the left, who is the 3rd spaceflight participant to visit the International Space Station. This mission launches under the call sign Rosviet, which means dawn, and was chosen by Tokarev. After Expedition 12 reaches the International Space Station, docks, and completes the on-orbit shift change, Expedition 11 will return home after 6 months in space. Olsen will join Krikalev and Phillips for that return.
From the historic launch pad in Central Asia, where Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to leave the planet, Expedition 11 launched to the International Space Station on a mission destined to be a part of history and to make history of its own. It was a return trip to ISS for both crew members. Commander Sergei Krikalev, one of the first who ever floated inside on the first Space Shuttle assembly mission, also spent 137 days on board as a member of the first long-duration crew. Expedition 11 made him not only the first 3-time visitor to ISS, but the first to make a second long-duration flight. Flight engineer and NASA ISS science officer John Phillips spent 8 days on board during the space shuttle flight that delivered the station's robot arm in 2001. After completing the handover from Leroy Chiao and Salijan Sharipov and watching Expedition 10 return to Earth, Krikalev and Phillips got busy showing the importance of keeping a crew on board, doing work that required a human hand to keep ISS habitable. That included maintenance on Electron, the primary source of breathing oxygen for station crews. By identifying the cause of its earlier failure, mission managers were able to send the proper replacement component of the system so the crew could bring Electron back to operation. Human hands were needed to remove a treadmill from the floor of the Zvezda module and replace damaged restraining ropes. That kept the exercise equipment operating properly, affording Krikalev and Phillips the workouts they needed to counteract some of the ill effects of weightlessness on the human body. During an on-orbit interview, Phillips explained the importance of keeping people on the station.
Well, I've seen reference in the press occasionally referring to the 2-person crews as caretaker crews. And indeed, we are taking care of the station, and that's an accomplishment in itself to prove that two people can operate the station, conduct the spacewalks, and keep the place in good shape for when we do build up our scientific capability. But we are continuing to do scientific experiments. We've been doing, Sergei and I both have been doing experiments on the U.S. and Russian segment pretty much every week. And for example, a couple days ago, we did an experiment with demonstrating ultrasound diagnostics of the heart, guided by doctors on the ground with non-specialized operators like us operating the ultrasound on board. And skills like that are very important for pushing further into space. So we are continuing to keep up a scientific program.
A program focused on learning what it takes for human beings to safely stay in space for the time it will take to go to the moon and to Mars. In one such experiment, called Foot, Phillips wore specially instrumented tights that precisely recorded the positions of the joints in his lower torso and the forces being applied to his feet. Those readings, and others from tests on the ground before and after the flight, contribute to the development of ways to prevent bone loss and muscle mass in astronauts on orbit. Other research during Expedition 11 contributed to the long-range goals, too, like a physics experiment to precisely measure fluid viscosity in zero-G, to learn more about how materials being considered for future on-orbit construction projects actually behave in that environment. Like space travelers for generations, Krikalev and Phillips also used their vantage point to document the state of our planet, whether it was an active volcano, like this one in Mexico, any one of several tropical storms in the northern hemisphere, or just a beautiful panorama seen from an altitude of more than 220 miles. In June, Expedition 11 registered another first. The first time an astronaut offered testimony to a congressional committee from off of the planet, when Phillips addressed the House Science Subcommittee.
Well, I've been here about 2 months now, and I have learned lessons, and we have learned lessons every day. And I'd like to emphasize that up here on the International Space Station, we are the experiment. Not only we, the crew, but the vehicle, the equipment on it, our operations concept, our mission control operations, and even our international partnership.
The operations concepts and international partnership scored a first in June when Krikalev and Phillips observed another stage of development of the station's robotics, the first movement of the station's Canadarm2 by flight controllers on the ground, working toward establishing the ability to use that robotic crane without an astronaut at the controls. In July, the crew took a day to go for a ride, relocating their Soyuz spacecraft from the Pirs docking compartment, where they'd parked it in April, and moving it to the Zarya module to facilitate the later use of Pirs as an airlock for a spacewalk. But Expedition 11's biggest first took place in late July, for the first time in 2.5 years since the loss of Columbia and its crew grounded the fleet. A visiting space shuttle crew arrived at the International Space Station. And this time, the new requirement of high-resolution digital photography of the orbiter by the station crew members added to the safety of the mission. Over 9 days together, Krikalev and Phillips worked with shuttle commander Eileen Collins and her crew to empty an Italian-made cargo module of supplies and equipment and reload Raffaello with 3 tons of returning experiment samples, refurbishable electronics gear, and broken hardware for analysis. They also assisted in 3 spacewalks that added new components to the station, brought its 4 control moment gyroscopes back to full operation, tested new shuttle repair techniques, and removed potentially dangerous gap filler material from between thermal tiles on the underside of Discovery, a potential hazard that would have been overlooked but for the photos taken by Krikalev and Phillips during rendezvous. Just days after Collins and her crew headed home, ISS was the stage for another bit of history. The wake-up call on August 16th heralded Krikalev's latest achievement.
We greet you this morning with a special congratulations to Sergei on a true milestone for humanity. While you were sleeping last night, you broke Sergei Avdeyev's record of 747 days, 14 hours, and 14 minutes in space. You
You are now the most experienced space traveler ever by 6 hours and 21 minutes and counting.
Thank you very much.
In an interview just days before setting the new mark, Krikalev was modest about the personal recognition and focused on the greater goal.
For me, it's not the goal. It's probably just a result of what I was doing for many years. I never was trying to break this rocket. It's just a result of doing my job, and I like this job.
But recognizing the new record took a back seat to preparation for the mission's only spacewalk, which happened the same week. During an excursion of just under 5 hours, Krikalev and Phillips updated science experiment packages on the exterior of the station and installed a new television camera on the aft end of Zvezda to aid in docking the new cargo ship, the European Space Agency's automated transfer vehicle, which will add a new means of delivering cargo to orbit. The work both on and in the International Space Station by Expedition 11 kept ISS shipshape and ready to sustain a human crew, and poised as the on-orbit base supporting the future of human exploration of space.
This is Mission Control Houston. The crew aboard the Soyuz rocket, which stands ready for launch, woke up about 2:30 this afternoon Central Time, or about 8.5 hours prior to launch. The crew members then participated in final traditional and required pre-launch activities. Before departing the crew quarters, this is a long-standing tradition of autographing the doorway from the crew quarters before exiting and heading toward the suit-up building. First, Valery Tokarev signed, now showing Bill Mcarthur signing his door. And Gregory Olson also signing his crew quarters door. Each crew member signs the door, which is a tradition for astronauts and cosmonauts flying aboard Soyuz spacecraft as they prepare to depart their crew quarters, where they've been staying during final launch preparations. Then the crew members receive a traditional blessing from a priest. The crew then departed the crew quarters to board a bus to travel the short distance between the crew quarters and the cosmonaut building to the suit-up room in the integration building, or building number 254. The crew departed the cosmonaut building about 4 o'clock this afternoon Central Time, about 7 hours prior to launch. The crew then arrived at building 254 about 5 p.m. this afternoon Central Time. The crew members suited up in their Sokol pressurized spacesuits. Once suited up, the suits were pressurized to ensure the pressure integrity of the suits before the crew departed for the launch pad. The actual suit-up activities occurred just after 6 o'clock this evening, about 5 hours prior to launch.
We are ready for your launch. I would like once again to confirm and report to you that all of the Soyuz vehicle systems are ready for launch, and all the appropriate services have already reported about their readiness. Russian Space Agency congratulates you on the completion of the preparations and would like to wish you successful flight. I would like to, in particular, wish you successful flight on the vehicle and successful work on board of the station for the commander and the flight engineer, Gregory Olson, a successful flight. I have kept my word, and your representatives are here today. Thank you. You're welcome.
With any of you. Billy, we were seeing Cindy and the kids this morning, and I told her that keeping track of you was more than a one-man job. So I wish all of you the best of luck on orbit on this mission. We always need luck, even in the absence of bad luck. So congratulations, good wishes, and we'll see you on the ground in 6 months.
Once the suit-up activities were completed and the crew had a chance to speak with managers at the suit-up site, the crew prepared for the departure for the launch pad. Here's a traditional crew walkout and report to the head of the State Commission. This occurred about 4 hours before launch.
Chairman of the Government Commission, Expedition 12 crew is ready for flight. I wish you successful flight, completion of the program, and successful return. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We need to board. Time to board.
These activities took place earlier today. The crew boarded the bus just before 8 p.m. Central Time. The launch to the ride The ride to the launch pad took about 20 minutes, with the crew arriving about 8:15 this evening Central Time. The crew said farewell and boarded the elevator about 8:20 p.m. Central Time and rode the elevator to the top of the Soyuz rocket to board their capsule. They've now been aboard the capsule about 2 hours. Astronaut Bill Mcarthur is the flight engineer for the Soyuz and is just out of view in the left seat. The first stage of the Soyuz rocket has 4 liquid engines strapped to the side of the core vehicle. Each will burn for approximately 1 minute, 58 seconds. The core engine of the first stage also serves as the second stage and continues to burn until about the 4 minute, 58 second point. This third stage has a single engine that will burn for about 4 minutes, 2 seconds, shutting down at the 9-minute mark of the flight. At this point, the Soyuz will be in an initial orbit of 143 miles at its high point and 118 miles at its low point, or about 230 by 189 kilometers. This is Mission Control Houston, now 29 minutes from launch, with the support structure moving away from the Soyuz rocket as it stands on the launch pad ready for launch. The 23.5-foot long Soyuz spacecraft weighs 15,800 pounds and is composed of 3 modules. At the top, the Orbital Module. At the bottom, the Instrumentation Propulsion Module, and sandwiched in between, the Descent Module in which the crew resides. After the spacecraft reaches orbit, its solar array wings are deployed, spanning nearly 35 feet. The entire spacecraft is nestled inside a protective shroud at the top of the rocket. The shroud is jettisoned about 3 minutes after launch. The crew uses the Orbital Module, sometimes known as the Habitational Module, during on-orbit operations. It includes the docking mechanism, the hatch, and the rendezvous antennae. This portion of the Soyuz separates from the remaining compartments only after the deorbit burn has been completed near the end of the spacecraft's mission. The Descent Module contains personally contoured couches for the crew members during launch, re-entry, and landing. This module contains all controls and displays necessary for critical flight activities. It also contains life support provisions, batteries for re-entry and landing, and the parachutes and landing retrograde rocket engines. The Instrumentation Propulsion Module houses the oxygen storage tanks, attitude control thrusters, avionics, and communications and control equipment. It also contains all avionics equipment used for primary guidance, navigation, control, and computer systems for the entire spacecraft. The propulsion compartment of this module handles all orbital maneuvers, including those needed for rendezvous with the ISS and the deorbit burn at the end of the spacecraft's mission. The two solar arrays are folded against the body of the Instrumentation Propulsion Module, which separates from the descent module after the deorbit burn, just like the Orbital Module. The entire capsule not only serves as a crew transport vehicle to and from the International Space Station, but it also remains docked to the station for 6 months, acting as an emergency return vehicle in the event the crew should have to leave the station unexpectedly. About 35 minutes ago, an onboard timing device was initiated that governs the final major events leading up to liftoff. This type of launch vehicle has been used in various configurations to launch satellites since 1963, and its first use as a crew transport was in 1967. It now stands ready to launch Expedition 12 toward its home for the next 6 months.
Every pair of crew members on board the International Space Station completes an assortment of tasks over the span of a 6-month mission. Everything from an inherently complicated walk outside the spacecraft to the seemingly simple task of eating a meal. For Expedition 12, everything the crew members do is designed to achieve one of 2 main goals for the flight.
In its very broadest sense, our goals are to first maintain the operational state of the ISS, conduct research that is targeted toward enhancing our capability to live and work in space.
So future explorers can more safely make the longer duration flights required for missions to the Moon and to Mars.
In my opinion, on this, space station is just only one step to the next exploration to the space. But it's a very important step.
We don't have the answers we need in order to send people to Mars yet. We know a lot of the questions, but we need to have the space station to find the answers to those questions.
And the crew members themselves are the test subjects. Is there an effect on the body's pulmonary system after spending a long period without gravity? How do you promote muscular and cardiovascular fitness in an environment where the body doesn't even have to work to resist gravity? In what ways does the brain make adjustments to how the arms and legs work in weightlessness? On-orbit assessments and the results of tests done pre-flight and after landing will add vital information to the database used by developers of future flights of exploration. Expedition 12 also features physics research, earth science explorations, and biology investigations with a clear and immediate goal.
Next part of experiments, it just gives us opportunity to grow up some plants on a space station, to be ready to go for long duration flight to the other planet.
The Expedition 12 crew members don't intend to spend the whole 6-month mission inside the station. Mcarthur, a veteran of 2 spacewalks on the ISS during a space shuttle assembly flight in 2000, and first-time spacewalker Tokarev plan at least 2 trips out the door, once in American spacesuits out of the Quest airlock, and once in Russian Orlan suits from the Pirs docking compartment. Among the tasks being planned are a climb to the top of the P6 truss to remove a probe that measured the electrical potential of plasma around the station, and assembly tasks that were deferred from EVAs on the last space shuttle mission.
There's a camera out on the P1 truss, out on the port side, on the lower side. It's called the P1 lower outboard camera. It was hoped that 114 would be able to install that, but again, their tasks for the third EVA got reprioritized, and so we think that'll climb very high on our priority list, and we'll go install this camera out on P1.
And in that way, Expedition 12 will contribute to ISS assembly and keep the station ready for resumption of space shuttle flights. The commander has a clear idea of what must be accomplished before they come home.
Above all, that we launch and land safely, that we conduct this mission in a safe manner. Having said that, I think for it to be considered a success, my criteria is that we will complete meaningful science during our stay, and that we will leave a station more capable than we found it.
Back at the launch site, continuous checks are made of spacecraft systems as the countdown proceeds on schedule. Liftoff is set for 10:55 Central Time tonight.
Starting into format selection. Copy.
Launch is precisely timed for rendezvous and docking with the International Space Station 2 days from now. At the time of tonight's launch, the station will be orbiting over the Pacific Ocean just off the coast of Chile. The Soyuz's telemetry systems and steering jets have been activated. During the climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry is downlinked to ground stations along the flight path and is routed to the Mission Control Center in Karla, just outside of Moscow. There, Russian Flight Director Pavel Smirnov oversees a group of flight controllers ready to begin monitoring the Soyuz following its launch and insertion into orbit. Russian Flight Director Rafael Ashimov is overseeing the space station operations in that flight control team. A group of Moscow-based U.S. flight controllers known as the Houston Support Group are led by Paul Wester and are joined by veteran NASA Flight Director Mark Faring and astronaut Peggy Whitson, who is a member of the station's Expedition 5 crew. The HSG, as the group is known, interfaces with its Russian counterparts for cohesive real-time operations. Here in Mission Control Houston, a team of about 15 flight controllers is watching over the International Space Station 24/7, 365 in conjunction with their counterparts in Moscow. The station at present is at an altitude of about 230 statute miles above the Pacific Ocean. In preparation for this launch, Expedition 11 has been readying the station for its new crew by rehearsing and testing procedures and systems for docking and preparing for their own return to Earth. Overseeing activities here in the flight control room is Space Station Flight Director Annette Hasbrook. She's joined by Capcom Drew Feustel, seated in the center here, and to his right is Canadian Space Agency astronaut Bob Thirsk, also on hand tonight. The flight control team is watching over the station's U.S. systems while the station crew sleeps. The crew members are scheduled to awaken about 2.5 hours from now at 1 a.m. Central Time. We're now T-minus 18 minutes and 4 seconds and counting until the launch of the Expedition 12 crew from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. After launch, the next 2 days will be spent watching over the rendezvous of the Soyuz with the International Space Station, leading to the docking scheduled to occur at 12:32 a.m. Central Time Monday. That docking will be followed 3 hours later by the opening of hatches into the station, which marks the start of an 8-day shift change between the two crews. The Soyuz crew has been on board the Soyuz for about 2 hours, conducting final system checks with Russian launch controllers.
They're both spaceflight veterans. They trained together for years for this flight. The International Space Station's Expedition 12 crew members are both small-town boys who even give the same answer when asked, "Is a space explorer what you always wanted to be?"
Interestingly enough, it is not what I always wanted to do.
And frankly speaking, it's not.
But they both ended up doing it, a job they love and believe in. Bill Mcarthur was born in 1951 in Laurinburg, North Carolina. The son of an Army officer, he grew up in that area of small towns surrounding Fort Bragg. But the Army wasn't Bill Jr.'s only interest. After all, he is a native of North Carolina.
Of course, North Carolinians are very proud of the fact that the Wright brothers' first flights took place in our state. And so there was just always this boyhood interest in flying. I built rockets when I was a kid and flew those, flew model airplanes.
After high school in 1969, he won an appointment to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point.
And while I was a cadet at West Point, near the end of the Vietnam conflict, and of course, aviation was a very important part of the Army's participation in Vietnam. So I saw that I did have an opportunity as an Army officer to fly and seized that opportunity as soon as I could. Flew helicopters for a number of years.
Those years were spent stationed at Fort Bragg and in Korea and in Georgia, where he earned a Master of Science degree in aerospace engineering at Georgia Tech. He taught at West Point, graduated from the Navy's Test Pilot School, and was assigned by the Army to the Johnson Space Center as a Space Shuttle Integration Test Engineer in 1987. Mcarthur was picked to become an astronaut in 1990 and made his first flight 3.5 years later on a 2-week Space Lab mission. MacArthur's second flight brought him to the Mir Space Station in 1995, part of a 4 Americans and 1 Canadian shuttle crew, meeting up with 2 Russians and a German on a Russian space station. In late 2000, just a month before the first expedition crew arrived at ISS, MacArthur was one of the spacewalkers on the shuttle flight that delivered the Z-1 truss and pressurized mating adapter number 3. Retired from the Army with the rank of colonel since 2001, the commander of Expedition 12 admits to a personal satisfaction from flying in space, but he knows he's involved with something much more important than his own goals.
If we're not pushing the boundaries of discovery, that means we're standing in one place. And as a soldier, I always hated marching in one place because you weren't accomplishing anything. And so I think space exploration has been this tremendous catalyst for the development of technology in this country and in the world. It's been a tremendous catalyst for us to make the human condition better.
MacArthur's crewmate for this 6-month mission is Russian Air Force Colonel Valery Tokarev. Tokarev was born in 1952 in the small village of Kapyar in the southern Soviet region of Astrakhan, west of the Caspian Sea. How small was the village?
It's a small village. We did not see bus because no bus, only horses, cow, tractor. We did not have good road because it was far from the big city. It's far from small city even.
Small enough that his family moved after elementary school because the village didn't have a high school, but not so small that it couldn't inspire a boy's dream.
I went to the library in our small village and read whole books about military pilots Second World War. It was so influenced to me, it just, it was serious impact to my mental. And I just wanted to be like them, like as a pilot.
Tokarev won admission to the Higher Military School of Fighter Pilots in Stavropol, and after graduation began his career in the Soviet Air Force. By 1982, he'd graduated from the Test Pilot Training Center and later the Yuri Gagarin Air Force Academy. In 1987, he was picked as a test cosmonaut for the Buran program, the Soviet Union shuttle program. And after Buran, he was assigned to the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center. Tokarev's first spaceflight came on the Shuttle Discovery in 1999, the first mission to dock to the International Space Station and begin setting it up for a permanent human habitation. Like his commander, Tokarev believes the work they're doing off the planet is crucial to our future.
If we stop, planet resources is limited. We know well about this. And it means we accept the risk for researches, new technologies, new planet might be, new resources. It's exactly needed. Necessity.
Bill Mcarthur and Valery Tokarev, with 4 previous flights between them, bring 45 days' experience on orbit to their first long-duration space mission.
Welcome to those joining NASA Television's live coverage of the launch of the 12th expedition crew aboard a Soyuz rocket from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Engineers continue to monitor all systems aboard the Soyuz rocket and its Soyuz TMA capsule, set to begin its voyage to space in about 11 minutes. The official launch time is 10:55 tonight Central Time, or about 9:55 a.m. local at Baikonur. A short while ago, commands were sent to switch power from ground sources to Soyuz's onboard batteries. After reaching orbit, the Soyuz's command and control system will be activated, and stored computer commands will deploy communications antennae. The first will be the Kurs rendezvous and docking antenna, which will be used to provide automatic range rate information on its final approach to docking with the Russian Pirs docking compartment. Just after reaching orbit, the spacecraft's solar arrays will be deployed to collect power for use by batteries to generate electricity for equipment on board. About 90 minutes into the mission, the crew will oversee the programmed activation sequence as the spacecraft makes its first pass over Russian ground stations. Systems activation includes the module's power supply system, its radio communications system, and the critical motion control system. Tomorrow, the motion control system will establish a stable orientation for the Soyuz as it continues its 2-day chase to rendezvous with the International Space Station. On the launch pad at Baikonur, the countdown is proceeding on schedule. Now just 9 minutes and 36 seconds from the launch of the Soyuz rocket. At this point in the countdown, the Soyuz's first stage steering jets are in the ready-to-launch position, and ground commands have been received from the rocket, indicating that all control and auxiliary systems are ready for launch. This is a live view inside the Soyuz capsule, with Soyuz commander Valery Tokarev seated in the center seat. In the right corner, lower corner of this view, and to his right is spaceflight participant Gregory Olson. Just out of view to Tokarev's left would be astronaut Bill Mcarthur, serving as the Soyuz flight engineer and the Expedition 12 commander. And this now view from another camera inside the Soyuz capsule showing astronaut Bill Mcarthur at the top right corner, to his right, Valery Tokarev. We're now at T-minus 6 minutes and 26 seconds and counting into the launch of the Soyuz rocket.
Approach. Watching the commander and flight engineer. Copy.
We're now T-minus 4 minutes and 50 seconds from launch. This time, the onboard system should be switched to onboard control, and Soyuz Commander Valery Tokarev's controls should be activated. As you can see, the crew members have closed their helmets, which puts them on suit oxygen, and the launch key should be inserted in the launch bunker, showing ready for launch. T-minus 3 minutes and 30 seconds with a nitrogen purge of engine combustion chambers now.
Pull out 3. Issued.
T-minus 3 minutes and counting.
Press.
T-minus 2 minutes and counting. All systems are still go for launch. The booster tank should be being pressurized for flight.
How do you read me? I read you loud and clear also.
T-minus 1 minute and counting. The Soyuz is now on internal power. Automatic launch sequencer is on. Less than a minute away from the launch of the 12th expedition crew and spaceflight participant Gregory Olsen on an 8-day flight.
Ground Soyuz.
The second umbilical tower moves away from the Soyuz. T-minus 30 seconds.
Start.
T-minus 13 seconds, and that the second umbilical tower moving away from the Soyuz. Minus 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Feeling vibration. Intermediate.
Booster ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Soyuz rocket transporting William Mcarthur, Valery Tokarev, and Gregory Olsen to the microgravity home in space.
The crew is feeling well. Load increasing. Experiencing vibration. Copy. 40 seconds, normal flight. Copy, confirming. Crew is feeling well. Nominal flight. Systems operating nominally. The crew is doing well. Some vibration. Copy. Seconds, nominal flight.
Good first stage performance. The Soyuz delivering 102 pounds of thrust from its 4 boosters and single engine. The first stage of the Soyuz measures 68 feet in length, 24 feet in diameter as it burns for the first 2 minutes and 6 seconds of the flight.
$80 seconds. All nominal. Copy. The crew is feeling well. 100 seconds in flight, nominal flight. Confirming. Crew is doing well.
Jettison of 4 strap-on boosters. These have completed their job and have dropped away at an altitude of 28 statute miles. The Soyuz is traveling at about 3,350 miles an hour.
140 seconds. $150 seconds. Confirming. First stage separation complete.
Flight controllers confirm escape tower and launch shroud jettison.
The network parameters are nominal. ...200 seconds in flight, nominal flight. Confirming. The crew is doing well. Everything is in order on board. Copy.
Just over 3 minutes into flight, the Soyuz second stage performing as advertised. The second stage of the Soyuz is 56 feet in length, 13.5 feet in diameter, with a single engine providing 96 tons of thrust for its 3 minutes and 28 seconds of operation.
...250 seconds, everything is fine on board.
Just over 4 minutes into flight, the Soyuz now traveling over 7,000 miles an hour.
$380. 290 seconds. We have second stage separation. Confirming second stage separation.
Second stage separation confirmed. The 4 liquid-fueled engines have completed their task for today, now dropping away. About 4 minutes of powered flight remaining. Soyuz now being propelled by the single engine of the Soyuz's third stage. The engine is providing 30 tons of thrust and will burn for 4 minutes and 2 seconds. You can see a gnome wizard selected by Tokarev to be the dangling item to show the movement of the Soyuz, and will float once the Soyuz is in orbit.
Third stage engines operating nominally. Everything is fine on board. Copy. ...370 seconds. All parameters are nominal. Copy, everything is fine on board. The crew is doing well.
Just over 6 minutes into the flight. All systems performing well. The Soyuz traveling more than 8,000 miles an hour.
Everything is fine on board. Static. All nominal, we are doing well. ...450 seconds nominal flight. All is fine on board.
Now 7.5 minutes into the flight, velocity now almost 13,500 miles an hour. Soyuz is at an altitude of 124 statute miles and is 750 miles downrange from the launch site.
470 seconds. The engines of the third stage are operating nominally. We're confirming that, and the crew is doing well as well. Copy.
Once the third stage delivers the Soyuz to orbit and the module is separated, a series of pre-programmed commands will be executed to prepare it for its orbital operations.
500 seconds of nominal flight.
Now 8 minutes 20 seconds into the flight. Those stored commands, called the time tag commands, allow many of Soyuz's systems to be automatically activated by onboard computers at precise times stored in those onboard computers.
520 seconds.
Flight controllers confirm third stage cutoff and separation. The single liquid-fueled engine has now shut down and has dropped away at an altitude of about 125 statute miles. The third stage is now performing an avoidance maneuver by opening an outgassing valve in the liquid oxygen tank.
Everything seemed fine. The third stage separation complete. Congratulations on that.
We have confirmation that the spacecraft separation went well. The Soyuz capsule and crew inside are now safely in orbit. The spacecraft automatically initiating its pre-programmed commanding for antennae and solar arrays to be deployed.
How are you doing? Doing well? This is Sunrise 1. We read you loud and clear also. So how was separation and all? All was fine. We have repress. Repress. Unclear. Say again. The separation was nominal. The repress indicator was on and then got turned off. Active 1, previous parameter 12, copy that.
The Soyuz is now orbiting at an altitude of about 143 miles by 118 miles, and that orbit will be raised systematically over the course of the next 2 days, placing it in close proximity to the International Space Station for the final rendezvous and docking set for 12:32 Monday morning Central Time.
The pressure reading right now, and give me times also. 585. I'm not reading you now. We have respective pressure readings 583, 516, and 760. Copy. .260, 262, 263, and then 17 and 217.6.
This is Mission Control Houston, now about 12 minutes into the flight of the Soyuz spacecraft. Control of the spacecraft from here on will be overseen from the control facility in Karla.
And 17.6.
Today and tomorrow, the engines will be fired 3 additional times to further raise Soyuz's orbit to that of the station.
4 and 260.
On Saturday afternoon, there will be a burn of 19.94 meters per second, or about 65 feet per second. That will occur at 2:32 and 57 seconds, so about 2:33 p.m. Central Time. The next burn will be at 3:13 p.m. Central Time of 14.4 meters per second, or about 47 feet per second. The third maneuver will be just before midnight Central Time on Saturday night at 11:59 p.m. Central, with a burn of 2 meters a second, or about 10 feet per second. Sunday, final engine burns will be executed to place the crew and its Soyuz in the proper orbit for final rendezvous and docking.
13:40, there will be TV disconnect via command link. I copy that. At 7:24:20, deactivation of TV link on program 1. Copy. Mission Control, this is Sunrise 1. Do you ready to copy the data, table data? Mission Control. Are you going to give me the data? I'm ready to dictate the data for you. At 12.1, 18. 17.4, 19, 263, 20, 0, 21, decimal 4, 22, 344, 23, 343, 23, 17.2, 25, 9 and 4, 26, 361. Copy, thank you.
Two days from now, a link up in space will take place high above Russia within ground tracking stations. The docking will continue the seamless transition of one crew to the next. And 10 days from now, handover completed, Expedition 11, along with Greg Olson, will board the Soyuz currently docked at the station and return home after 6 months in space, and leave this Expedition 12 crew to oversee the ongoing research and operation on the space station. During its mission, Expedition 12 will be visited by one unmanned Progress supply vehicle and conduct at least 2 spacewalks to continue the external outfitting of the orbiting complex. The next crew for the space station, Expedition 13, will launch to the station in late March.
55. Downrange, minimum 201, maximum 250. How did you copy? Copy. 250 maximum altitude, minimal is 201 nominal. Ascent, the crew is doing well, everything is fine on board. Next, compass will perform SUD motion control system test number 1 on page 59. Prior to that, you will issue command J2. Time for compass 8:25:00. Copy 8:25:00. J2 command to be issued prior to test. Talk to you then on VHF compass. Copy. On page 59, you can open and we can check error repair time and check startup time for SUD test number 1. I copy.
This is Mission Control Houston, now about 17 minutes into the flight of the Soyuz. Continuing to watch video is available with astronaut Bill Mcarthur up on the top right corner, and to his right, cosmonaut Valery Tokarev serving as the Soyuz commander. Mcarthur serving as the Soyuz flight engineer and will be the Expedition 12 commander.
T084150. All correct. Okay, let's make another measurement of pressure. No change. No change, just like before. 583. You can open visors and release the belt. Copy. The pressure is stable, 816. Copy, we have no issues. Thermal sensors can be disconnected at the specified time, and we will expect new pressure readings, and you may be able to remove your gloves at that time. Your suits will no longer be pressurized. Make sure you will perform probe extension to initial position between half an hour and hour measurement of pressure. And by the next compass, make sure you have to report on the probe extension to initial position and pressure readings. And at 8:25, we're expecting the next compass. This is the last minute of this compass. How are you doing? The crew is doing well. Everything is fine on board. 19, do you read me? Read you. Everything is fine. Greetings on your insertion. Everything seems fine. There's no hurry. Start your work. Thank you. Thank you for your greetings. Everything is fine on board.
Behind the scenes, some negotiations, some questions perhaps on future cooperation between NASA and the Russians on spaceflight.
Well, absolutely. These tickets for space tourists, for instance, which cost an estimated $20 million, have become an essential source of funding for the cash-strapped Russian space agency. Since 2003 and the US shuttle Columbia disaster, the Russian space agency has been ferrying US astronauts to the International Space Station for free. But now it says, or by the end of the year at least, it says it's going to start charging a similar amount to NASA, the US space agency, to take its astronauts up on its Soyuz rockets. That's running into problems because of legislation in the United States passed by the US Congress preventing a transfer of funds to Russia over the International Space Station because of its cooperation with Iran and its nuclear program. So the two space agencies, the two governments working together to try and resolve that at this moment, Shihab.
And just in summary, as far as this mission is concerned, how long will it take? When will Mr. Olsen return to Earth?
Well, it's going to be a 10-day mission. They've got a long journey ahead of them. It's going to take at least 2 days, some 48 hours, for this Soyuz rocket to reach and to dock with the International Space Station. The primary mission of this Expedition 12 is to switch out the crews of the International Space Station, the US astronaut and the Russian cosmonaut on board this rocket. Will be replacing the crew on board the International Space Station that's been there since April. Greg Olsen says that he wants to carry out a number of private experiments on board. He runs a scientific company in the United States and will be conducting his own experiments. If all goes according to plan as it has so far, they'll be bumping back down to Earth somewhere again on the steppes of Kazakhstan on the 11th of October, Shihab.
Matthew Chance, thank you.
Hat der US-Unternehmen Gregory Olsen bezahlt, zur internationalen Raumstation ISS zu fliegen. Vor wenigen Stunden startete das Soyuz-Raumschiff vom russischen Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur in Kasachstan. Mit an Bord sind der US-Astronaut Bill Mcarthur und sein russischer Kollege Valery Takaryov. Die beiden werden von mehrere Monate lang den Aufbau der Raumstation vorantreiben und wissenschaftliche Experimente durchführen. Olsen fliegt am 11. Oktober mit der Langzeitbesatzung, die jetzt auf der ISS ist, zur Erde zurück.
Crew to the International Space Station. Matthew Chance reports on Saturday's launch.
It was a flawless blast-off from the Kazakh steppe. The Russian Soyuz rocket carrying US space tourist Greg Olson streaking into the skies on time and problem-free. With the US-Russian crew at the controls, it took exactly 9 minutes to reach orbit. Ahead, a grueling 2-day flight to the International Space Station. Olson, who's a 60-year-old grandfather and a successful businessman, has undergone hundreds of hours of training for the trip. He says he'll be conducting his own experiments in space and is more than just a tourist. Members of his family were at the launch site to see him off. 2 other millionaires have flown before him with tickets at $20 million. Paying passengers have become a crucial source of funding for the cash-strapped Russian space agency. The US-based company organising the trips says it plans to expand space tourism, offering a flight around the moon for $100 million.
Over the next 5 or 10 years at Space Adventures, we will fly more people in space as commercial passengers, as tourists and private explorers than have flown in space in the history of mankind, and over the next 5 or 10 years. And long term, it will definitely be private companies alongside governments that really open up the space frontier and make it something that the rest of humanity can benefit from.
The latest mission will deliver supplies and a fresh crew to the International Space Station. And after 10 days of high flying, the latest millionaire space tourist will come back to Earth. Matthew Chance, CNN Moscow.
And I'm Rosemary Church at the CNN Centre. I'll be back with an update of the headlines on the other side of the break. Do stay with us.
Mission 12 crew is ready for flight.
Ein Bilderbuchstart bei Bilderbuchwetter. Im Kontrollzentrum sind alle zufrieden. Die 12. Besatzung der ISS ist auf dem Weg zur Weltraumstation. Montag früh gegen 7:40 Uhr soll das Sojus-Raumschiff an der ISS andocken und dann ein halbes Jahr lang im Weltraum bleiben. Wir hoffen, dass wir zeigen können, dass da draußen große Abenteuer und Entdeckungen möglich sind, sagt der Kommandant. Wenn die Raumfahrtnationen der Erde zusammenarbeiten, haben wir sogar genug Potenzial, um über den Erdorbit hinauszukommen. Ein Mann des Dreierteams allerdings wird bereits in 10 Tagen die Heimkehr antreten. Gregory Olson. Der US-Millionär verwirklicht seinen Lebenstraum mit dieser Reise in den Weltraum und lässt sich den Spaß 17 Millionen Euro kosten. Umgerechnet 1,7 Millionen Euro pro Tag, immerhin all inclusive. Die Russen können das Geld gut gebrauchen und Olson ist glücklich. Ich freue mich auf die Schwerelosigkeit, sagt er vor dem Start. Außerdem will ich meine Kamera mitnehmen und später meinen Kindern von den Erlebnissen erzählen. Bevor sich die 3 den Segen des Priesters abholen konnten, stand ein monatelanges Fitnesstraining auf dem Programm. In der Schwerelosigkeit wird Olson Kristalle züchten. Die Erkenntnisse will er für sein Unternehmen nutzen und vielleicht kann er dann die Reisekosten sogar noch von den Steuern absetzen.
Die Erde als kleine blaue Kugel sehen. Diesen Lebenstraum erfüllt sich seit dem frühen Morgen Gregory Olson. Der US-Unternehmer ist von Kasachstan aus ins All gestartet als 3. Privatmann der Raumfahrtgeschichte. Jetzt gerade fliegt er mit der neuen Langzeitbesatzung zur internationalen Raumstation ISS. Michael K. berichtet.
Um 5:54 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit hebt die Sojus-Rakete vom Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ab. Für Gregory Olson beginnt das größte Abenteuer seines Lebens. Aber bis es soweit war, musste er lange bangen. Denn vor einem Jahr schien er körperlich nicht fit genug zu sein. Mit einem monatelangen Intensivtraining errang er schließlich doch noch die Raumreife. 17 Millionen Euro blättert der Businessman für das All-Ticket auf den Tisch der russischen Raumfahrtbehörde. Er sei ein großartiger Kerl, habe hart trainiert, sagen US-Astronaut Mcarthur und dessen russischer Kollege Tokarev, die mit Olson fliegen. Sie haben alle erdenklichen Notsituationen mit dem Allneuling durchgespielt. Aber Olson ist nicht der erste Tourist in der ISS. Im Frühjahr 2001 schaffte es der Amerikaner Dennis Tito als erster, sich seinen Platz im Orbit für den gleichen Preis zu erkaufen. Er habe das Paradies gesehen, jubelte er nach seiner Rückkehr. Schon ein Jahr später folgte ihm der Südafrikaner Mark Shuttleworth als zweiter Privatbesucher in die ISS. Er führte sogar selbst biologische und medizinische Experimente durch. Auch der dritte Weltraumreisende Gregory Olsen will nicht nur faulenzen, wenn er übermorgen angedockt hat. Und während die NASA den Urlauber wieder nur zähneknirschend akzeptiert hat, freuen sich die finanzklammen Russen über den Geldsegen des Multimillionärs.
Und Flugreisen werden auch immer teurer. 20 Millionen $ zahlt Greg Olsen für eine Woche bei minimalem Komfort. Er ist der dritte Privatmann, der sich den großen Traum vom Weltall erfüllt. Heute Morgen kurz vor 6 ging es für den amerikanischen Unternehmer los. Mit 2 Profi-Astronauten ist er vom kasachischen Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur zur internationalen Raumstation ISS gestartet.
Vor dem Start heute früh in Baikonur, dem russischen Weltraumbahnhof. Der Pope wünscht der neuen ISS-Besatzung eine gesegnete Reise. Mit von der Partie Gregory Olsen, Unternehmer aus den USA. Der 60-Jährige ist inzwischen der dritte Weltraumtourist, hat 20 Millionen $ für den Trip ins All bezahlt. Geld, das die klamme russische Raumfahrt gut gebrauchen kann. Ich mache das, weil ich im All die Schwerelosigkeit erleben will. Auch will ich Infrarotkameras testen, die meine Firma produziert. Ich freue mich auf diese einzigartige Erfahrung. Gregory Olsen kommt nach 10 Tagen mit der alten ISS-Besatzung wieder auf die Erde zurück. Astronaut Mcarthur und sein russischer Kollege Tokarev bleiben ein halbes Jahr lang im All. Der Raketenstart geht problemlos über die Bühne. 9 Minuten lang fliegt die Sojus, dann erreicht sie die Erdumlaufbahn. Alles planmäßig an Bord, meldet die Besatzung. Geringe Vibrationen, normale Belastung, alles in Ordnung. 2 Tage lang wird das Raumschiff die Erde umkreisen, am Montagmorgen an die ISS andocken. Bereits die 12. Langzeitbesatzung ist somit im Anflug. Sie wird die Kommerzialisierung der ISS-Missionen weiter vorantreiben. Die Besatzung soll im All einen Werbespot drehen für ein japanisches Fertiggericht. Die russische Raumfahrt ist flexibel, wenn es ums Geldverdienen geht.
Sojus-Rakete ist am Morgen eine neue Besatzung zur internationalen Raumstation ISS gestartet. US-Astronaut Mcarthur und der russische Kosmonaut Tokarev sollen als 12. Langzeitbesatzung ein halbes Jahr auf der ISS arbeiten.
Der dritte im Bunde links im Bild ist der US-amerikanische Weltraumtourist Greg Olsen. Seinen Traum vom Flug ins All kann sich Olsen nur mit Hilfe der Russen erfüllen, denn nur die halten die Verbindung zur internationalen Raumstation aufrecht. Seine Familie, einschließlich Enkel, hat Olsen zum Start, für den er 20 Millionen $ zahlte, gleich mitgebracht. Hier probieren die Astronauten die für sie angefertigten Sitzschalen. Jede ist an die individuellen Körpermaße angepasst. Im Raum sollen sie medizinische Experimente durchführen. An diesem Programm soll auch Olsen teilnehmen, bevor er am 11. Oktober zur Erde zurückkehrt. Im Gegensatz zum Privatmann Olsen fliegt der US-Profi-Astronaut Mcarthur gratis. Und auch die US-Regierung und die NASA zahlen für seinen Flug keinen Rubel. Die Russen fordern, dass die Amerikaner, die keine eigenen einsatzfähigen Raumfähren mehr haben, sich künftig an ihren Flügen finanziell beteiligen. Letzter Check in der engen Raumkapsel. Dann hebt die 300 Tonnen schwere Sojus ab. Alles läuft normal an Bord der Rakete, melden die Astronauten. 33 Mal wird sie die Erde umkreisen, um am Montag früh an der internationalen Raumstation anzudocken.
Hier auf der Erde ist der Herbst jetzt tatsächlich da und das heißt in den meisten Teilen Deutschlands mieses Schmuddelwetter. Was liegt da näher, als sich mit einem Buch an die Heizung zu drücken? Und das tun offenbar in diesen Tagen Zehntausende Kinder und Jugendliche. Der Run auf das neue Harry Potter Buch ist so groß, dass bereits nach einem Tag wieder nachgedruckt werden muss. Herbstwetter ist offenbar Potterwetter und Potterfieber ist überall. Erdmann Hummel.
Deutschland heute Nacht, kurz vor der Geisterstunde. Tausende Kinder stürmen im Dunkeln die Buchläden, um dem Vorleser zu lauschen und zum ersten Mal Harry Potter und der Halbblutprinz zu hören. Ein paar Schokofrösche versüßen das Warten auf den neuen 6. Band.
Man kann sich in eine ganz andere Welt hineinversetzen und trotzdem ist es noch realistisch.
In ganz Deutschland haben Buchhändler Nachtschichten eingelegt, um die 2 Millionen gedruckten Exemplare unter die Muggel zu bringen. Am Rhein wurde der neue Potter mit einer riesen Zauberparty auf Burg Satzweig begrüßt. Wahre Hogwarts-Stimmung kommt da auf, wenn Hexen aus der Tiefe steigen und auf dem Burgsee rudern. Zauberhaft schweben Muggel auf Einhörnern umher. Doch nichts ist erhebender als der Moment, wenn man das Buch endlich lesen kann.
Dann stürzte er wieder durch die Dunkelheit. Sekunden später schlugen seine Füße auf festem Boden auf. Er öffnete die Augen und sah, dass er und dann Dumbledore in einer belebten, altertümlichen Londoner Straße standen.
Richtig cool.
Aber in der Nacht kam auch schon etwas Wehmut auf, denn Band 6 ist leider das vorletzte Abenteuer des Zauberlehrlings. Denn mit Buch 7 soll nämlich endgültig Schluss sein mit Harry Potter. Wer weiß, wann wir solche Bilder wiedersehen werden, wo schon früh am Morgen Kinder in den Büchern schmökern.
In der Schule eingeschlafen. Denn seit 0:01 Uhr darf der neue Harry Potter Band verkauft werden. Bis dahin waren die Bücher ja besser gehütet worden als Fort Knox. Entsprechend ungeduldig hatten Hunderttausende in den Geschäften gewartet. Maren Weber berichtet.
1, 2, 1, endlich Mitternacht, endlich den 6. Harry Potter Band selbst in den Händen halten. Noch im Buchladen wurden die ersten Seiten gierig verschlungen. Der Nachwuchs war selig.
Ich finde das Buch total toll und ich fühle mich richtig toll, dass ich es jetzt habe. Also ich finde das richtig schön, dass ich dieses Buch jetzt habe und endlich lesen kann. Also ich glaube, ich lese auch die ganze Nacht durch, weil ich freue mich einfach total.
Selig sind auch die Buchverkäufer. Sowohl beim Buchhandel als auch beim Verlag und den Online-Versandhäusern herrscht Goldgräberstimmung.
Die deutsche Version von Harry Potter 6 ist schon der größte Vorbesteller bei Amazon.de, den wir jemals hatten, und hat damit auch die englische Version bereits 2 Wochen mit über 150.000 Vorbestellern 2 Wochen vor Erscheinung schon übertroffen.
Das Buch kommt in Deutschland in einer Startauflage von 2 Millionen auf den Markt. Das ist absoluter Rekord. Und der Hype darum muss wohl kalkuliert sein. So mussten per Vertrag zum Beispiel alle Lieferwagen verplombt werden. Mehrere tausend Postmitarbeiter lieferten noch in der Nacht die Bücher aus.
Bitte schön. Dankeschön. Finde ich toll. Damit haben Sie einem Jungen eine große Freude gemacht.
Toll. Haben Sie das gesehen? Das Leuchten in den Kinderaugen. Also das ist das wert, dass man nachts diese Zustellung macht.
Der kleine Zauberer erscheint wirklich alle glücklich zu machen. Nur manche Eltern durften sich ärgern, wenn sie ihren Nachwuchs in den nächsten Tagen erstmal nicht mehr zu Gesicht bekommen.
Wenn Sie letzte Nacht so zwischen 1 und 2 Uhr morgens Ihren Nachbarn an der Tür stehen sahen und er hat behauptet, er wartet auf den Postboten, dann haben Sie sich vielleicht auf den Arm genommen gefühlt, aber das stimmte schon. 100.000 Deutsche haben sich in der Nacht den neuen Harry Potter ausliefern lassen. Und quer durchs Land stiegen die üblichen Potter-Partys, also der Zauber lässt nicht nach, auch nicht bei Band 6.
Einfahrt des Hogwarts-Express. Verspätet erreicht er nach Mitternacht Burg Satzwey in der Eifel. Tausende Kinder warten schon sehnsüchtig. Alles ist hier wie im Buch. Fliegende Autos, der Zauberwald und natürlich Professor Dumbledore, Harrys Verbündeter im Kampf gegen das Böse. Große Spannung, als der neue Band endlich verteilt ist. Wie wird es wohl weitergehen? Wünsche der kleinen Fans.
Dass Voldemort stirbt, ja. Vielleicht, dass der Harry noch mehr Verwandte findet oder sowas.
Dass die Bücher schön spannend sind und dass ich viel Spaß an ihnen habe.
Mit Harrys fliegendem Besen, Nimbus 2000 genannt, liefert auch die Post. Pünktlich zur Geisterstunde. In manchen Orten sogar stilecht verkleidet. Mehr als 100.000 Bücher erreichen so in der Nacht große und kleine Fans des Zauberers in ganz Deutschland.
Hallo liebe Kinder, ich bin der neue Harry Potter Band. Harry Potter!
Die meisten wollen gleich wissen, wie es weitergeht. Lord Voldemort, der gefährliche schwarze Magier, kehrt zurück. Mit Hilfe eines Zaubertrankbuches, das vorher einem Halbblutprinzen gehörte, will sich Harry gegen die Gefahr wappnen. Aber auch die Liebe spielt bei dem mittlerweile jugendlichen Helden eine größere Rolle. Harry Potter führt die Leser wieder in eine Welt aus Fantasie und Wirklichkeit und bleibt Vorbild.
Weil der eigentlich so gut zaubern kann. Es kann ja eigentlich ganz wenige nur zaubern. Keine gewöhnlichen Menschen können ja zaubern.
Schon jetzt sind mehr als 2 Millionen Bände ausgeliefert. Die Fangemeinde wächst und wächst. Harry Potter steht kurz davor, seine eigenen magischen Rekorde zu brechen.
Etwas wie Ostern und Weihnachten zusammen. Genau um 0 Uhr startete der Verkauf des 9. und 6. Bandes Harry Potter und der Halbblutprinz. Remscheid war bereits am gestrigen Abend die Potter-Hauptstadt des Bergischen Landes. Auf dem Schützenplatz gab es in einem Zirkuszelt eine große Zauberparty und das Buch, eben erst um Mitternacht.
Die Zauberer sind nur äußerlich gelassen.
Die Anspannung könnte jetzt nicht größer sein, denn schon seit Monaten fiebern die Potter-Fans dem neuen Buch entgegen. Für Miriam sind die letzten Stunden die schwersten, denn trotz aller Magie bekommt sie den Wälzer vor Mitternacht nicht in die Hände.
Meine Freundin hat das Buch und auf Englisch und sie hat mir so ein paar Details gesagt, was drin vorkommt. Und ja, von gehört habe ich schon, seit das Neueste jetzt darüber gesagt wurde.
Die quälend lange Wartezeit vertreibt der Ekel. Das Zelt auf dem Remscheider Schützenplatz gleicht der Zauberschule Hogwarts aus dem Buch. Was für Normalmenschen eher gruselig erscheint, gehört hier zum Alltag.
Speziell für die kleinen Zauberer heute eine schleimige Krötensuppe mit Spinnenbeinen, also typische Zutaten: Spinnenbein, Fledermausblut, Froschhirn, Krötenschleim selber, ganz lecker.
Doch der Krötenschleim ist verzaubert und schmeckt wie Chili con Carne. Die Potter-Fans warten weiter auf das Buch. Vorher wird aber noch das schönste Kostüm prämiert und die Jury ist fasziniert, wie viel Mühe sich die Remscheider gemacht haben.
Das ist ja Kult mittlerweile, schlicht und ergreifend. Und wenn man das sieht, das sind ja nicht nur Kinder, das sind Erwachsene, die sich verkleidet haben, die sich fertig gemacht haben. Da sind Leute bei, die würden sehr wahrscheinlich niemals Karneval feiern, aber zu Harry Potter Nacht ziehen sich ein Kostüm an. Ja, ist doch schön.
Um genau 0 Uhr dann der Höhepunkt. 450 Bücher, ·656 Seiten gehen innerhalb von Minuten über den Ladentisch.
Sofort lesen. Anfangen zu lesen.
Wie viel wirst du schaffen?
Schauen wir mal. Ich bin noch hellwach.
Ich werde es durchlesen, auf jeden Fall.
Egal wie spät es wird.
Ja, unter Umständen schon. Wenn meine Mutter mich lässt, schon.
Doch manchmal sind die irdischen Kräfte stärker als die Magie und Harry Potter muss auf morgen warten.